Chapter 1251, Kenneth Alive and Dead. This article is updated by Vomiting Blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ No matter how many people are separated between the two, Kenneth can clearly feel Marks McClown's eyes sticking to him. And that kind of gaze made Kenneth wonder if he was not wearing clothes today. That's right, in front of Marks McClown, Kenneth had a strong feeling that Marks McClown's vision could penetrate his clothes directly, even through his brain. There is no such thing as an affair, and the feeling that any thoughts are exposed in front of someone that I hate is really not more painful. Especially Marks McClown's answer made him unable to say a rebuttal every time. In class, "Don't stare at me anymore." Marks sigh. Kenneth's angry veins were violent. 337. But they are all staring at you. Marks McClown pointed to the students around him. Kenneth was speechless. At the corridor. "Don't follow me, Marks sigh. Kenneth gritted his teeth and warned. "But I'm going here too," Marks McClown replied blankly. Kenneth was speechless. Kenneth wanted to turn his head and kill Marks countless times, but he couldn't beat it again. This helpless situation directly caused Kenneth to have not fallen asleep for 3 consecutive days. In fact, Marks McClown had no other purpose. He just wanted to refer to Kenneth's magic circuit. It is well known that Kenneth's family has been passed down to the 9th generation, and Kenneth is a recognized genius since childhood. His magic circuit, the degree of its excellence is beyond doubt. So Marks studied Kenneth these days, that is, he was studying his magic circuit. Through careful exploration of mental power one after another, Marks McClown has basically constructed the basic prototype of Kenneth's magic circuit in his mind. It's just the magic circuit, which is better to be cautious, so Marks' observation of Kenneth is even more subtle, especially during class. Because Kenneth is a lecturer, he will inevitably demonstrate. While Kenneth was doing the demonstration, Marks McClown silently paid attention to the movement of every strand of magic in Kenneth's body, mobilized several magic circuits, and the direction of the flow of magic, so as to understand Kenneth's magic bit by bit. The circuit touched it thoroughly. After confirming that he fully understood Kenneth's magic circuit, Raushi Marks was also a little surprised at the magic of this magic circuit, so he became more interested in constructing a simulated magic circuit in his body. If you let others know what Marks McClown intends to do, it is estimated that even those 5 magicians will be frightened. But Marks does not intend to let others know about this kind of thing. All the magic circuits in this world belong to the magician himself, and even many special magic circuits belong to the research results and own their own copyright, which is equivalent to personal research results. So as long as Marks McClown didn't say anything, no one would take the initiative to explore under Ming Mian's regulations. At most, he felt that Marks McClown was really a genius. Of course, it is difficult to say whether there is a magician secretly wanting to study Marks McClown, but with Marks McClown's true heroic strength, of course the evildoers will destroy one when they come. After more than half a month, Marks finally stopped pestering Kenneth to observe. He is ready to construct his own magic circuit. This kind of thing is mysterious, but in fact, Marks McClown is absolutely sure that he will not fail. Retreat. It's in the Eastern magic system. That retreat. What is it like? Weber stared at Marks in a daze. The boss told him just now that he would let him go out to help guard him tonight, and that no one could disturb him. Weber is naturally fine, but he is also curious about why Marks suddenly retreats. "You'll know tomorrow." Marks McClown smiled. Tomorrow? Weber's eyes widened at once. He hadn't heard of anyone who stayed closed all night. Those people of the Magic Association who focus on the study of Eastern magic, no matter which one retreats, talk about 10.5 months less, and even more than a few months will not see anyone. Sure enough, what the boss is doing is so unexpected. Although I have understood it many times, Weber is still not used to it. McClown. Marks McClown nodded and closed the door. Weber shrugged helplessly, and made a cup of coffee by himself, planning to study the spirit of the night. Marks McClown did not immediately start constructing Kenneth's magic circuit. This project is not big or small. Marks McClown needs to use his own super magical power to override the ability to form similar magic with his own magical power itself. The pipeline of the circuit then flows in a magical way. In other words, if other people's magic circuits are innate or cannot be changed to improve magic effects, then Mark's Eye's magic circuit is completely composed of magic power itself. Fundamentally speaking, it is even possible to increase the number and quality of magic circuits without limit according to Mark's Eye's active adjustments. If this statement were made known to the nobles at the top of the clock tower, they would definitely feel that Marks McClown was still dreaming. The number of magic circuits that can be increased infinitely, just thinking about it, feels terrifying. However, this is only a theoretical statement. In fact, Mark's Eye will not deliberately pursue the number of magic circuits. Of course, he knows that the more magic circuits, the more powerful they are, but his magic circuits are controlled by his own mental power and magic power. If the form is too complicated, the consumption of his spiritual power and magic power is also enormous. He just needs to find that balance point. Slowly constructing Kenneth's magic circuit in his mind, Marks McClown checked it carefully and confirmed that the flow of each magic circuit was exactly the same as Kenneth's. Harry Potter, The Most Powerful Mage Chapter 1252, Unlimited Number of Magic Circuits. This article is updated by Middle. Vomiting Blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ Then, Marks McClown made a decision that could anger Kenneth to death. It's just a perfect reenactment of Kenneth's magic circuit. It feels like it's not enough. It's better to double the number of magic circuits first. Marks McClown actually increased the number of Kenneth's magic circuits little by little in her mind. Kenneth's magic circuit was excellent, and the clock tower couldn't find a few comparable. But for Mark's Eye's extremely terrifying spiritual power, this magic circuit was more than enough. So Mark's Eye plans to make a reform. In fact, this is not a transformation. He just doubled Kenneth's magic circuit. Originally, the Kenneth family was passed down to his generation for 9 generations. Kenneth has 82 magic circuits by nature, not to mention its excellence and complexity. 12. Duplicate such a unique magic circuit, and then multiply it by 2. That is a total of 164 magic circuits. Mark's Eye's magic circuit can be called horror. In almost an hour, Marks McClown had completely prepared her magic circuit, and all that was left was to let the magic in her body realize this magic circuit. This step was considered a big project even for Mark's Eye. This kind of extreme magic control ability, this world probably can't find another person besides Mark's Eye. The magic slowly formed in the body following the contours in Marks McClown's mind. The magic power that was originally surging like the ocean was forcibly divided into many tributaries of different sizes by Marks McClown. These magical rivers branched into smaller streams again, and finally formed a perfect loop. If someone is present at this time, you will see the cloud knight that has always been so indifferent. At this time, there is also a layer of fine sweat on the forehead. In the silent night, no one noticed that something happened in this humble dormitory that could subvert the worldview of all magicians. And in another dormitory at the same time, Johannes, who was still lying on the bed, and Newman, who was also seriously injured, both had the same anger on their faces. And there were several other people sitting in front of them. "You are embarrassed to be beaten like this by one person?" one of them said. "It sounds good. Why don't you go by yourself?" If Newman is able to move, he can't wait to rush up and kick him. A total of 19 people have never beaten Mark's Eye. If you want to blame, you can only blame Mark's Eye for being too abnormal. Me? He'll forget it. The speaker shrugged, and then smiled. "Why is this kind of person worthy of me playing in person?" "Oh, if you can't beat it, you can't beat it. Didn't Newman call you when he called someone?" Johannes snorted and said, "Stop talking about nonsense. Let's talk about it. What can you do to kill that Mark's Eye?" "Ha ha, You still understand me? Johannes cast a white glance. Nobles didn't know that the man in front of him was famous for his scheming. He was obviously not very powerful, but few dared to provoke him. The reason is that this person's family specializes in dealing with all kinds of killers. Many aristocratic people, even if they are wealthy, may not be able to find a powerful killer, but this person is different. Johannes feels that for this kind of work, he will definitely be able to find a suitable person to pick him up. I have a person who specializes in assassinating magicians. Although I use all the means of righting 3 abuses, it is the first choice to deal with magicians. Bart raised his eyebrows, and talked about buying murder. He said that the whole clock tower was second and no one dared to say first. Okay. Newman yelled immediately, thinking of clapping his hands with excitement, but he pulled the wound when he moved, and he couldn't help but breathe in the pain. Then choose him. More than a dozen students from the Noble School were completely wiped out by a first-year student. If this matter spreads out, our Noble School members will not come out to see people in the future. So this person must die, Johannes said viciously. At that time, I think he is still arrogant. Newman is the most depressing one. When he originally called people, half of them were calling to watch the show. But who knew that Mark-Si's strength was so much higher than they thought? It was originally to retaliate against Mark-Si for Johannes, but now, it's really weird. Who is that Mark-Si? Another said, look, he came to the clock tower to study suddenly, right? If what you said is true, the one who can beat a dozen students and is easy to do, at least has a sacrifice position. Strength. Such a strong person comes to the clock tower to be a student? Don't you think it's strange? What's weird? Originally, I 303 shouldn't see this person here. He doesn't even have a magic circuit, and I feel dirty with my hands when fighting him. Newman gritted his teeth and said, I don't know if he forgot the fact that he was beaten and couldn't get up. Newman is right. As long as a person dies, it doesn't matter what secrets he has. It is a price to dare to discredit the nobles like this. I want him to know that an ordinary person is not qualified to talk to us. Fight. The shattered light in Bart's eyes, it was the cold light of disdain, like the pride of aristocrats. Weber was awakened by a bang. He opened his eyes and saw that there was a book under his feet and a bag on his head. Hiss. Weber, who had only realized the pain now, stretched out his hand and scratched his head. When he looked back, he was stunned, and then a surprise quickly came to the corner of his mouth. Boss! Weber shouted and stood up. Harry Potter, the Most Powerful Mage, Chapter 1253, Operating Rules of the Clock Tower. This article is updated by Vomiting Blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _. I actually fell asleep. What do you want? Marks McClown leaned over and sat down on the sofa. How about retreat? Weber smiled and changed the subject. After only one night, I wonder what kind of surprise the boss will give. Generally, but I want to know how the grade of the clock tower is determined. Marks McClown asked. The clock tower is the highest institution of the Magic Association, so the payment is the same as the general institutions outside the world. Now there are a total of 4 grades. There are entrance examinations every year. Generally, the first grade only needs to learn the basic theory to pass assess and enter the second grade. And when the second grade is promoted to the third grade, you will be awarded the title of the Last Son. When the third grade is promoted to the fourth grade, you will be awarded the title of the Eldest Son. Once the fourth grade graduates from the clock tower, it will become an official opening. Magician. But if this year's assessment fails, you won't be able to advance to the next level, Weber said seriously, wondering if the boss has only been in school for 2 months. Why did he suddenly ask about this? When is the assessment? Marks McClown asked again. It's usually September each year, but it's only May now, and it's still a long time. Does the boss want to? A bold idea suddenly appeared in Weber's mind. Well, I want to participate in the assessment, but in September. The time is a bit long. Is there any other way? Marks McClown's original purpose of entering the clock tower was only to learn and understand the magic rules of the world. Now he is familiar with these basic rules and has his own mimic magic circuit. It is just a waste of time to learn these. To gain a deeper understanding of the mysteries of magic in this world, one must have access to higher and deeper information. But these undoubtedly require magicians of the corresponding grade and level to be able to contact. Sure enough. Of course there are ways. You can apply directly to the Magic Association, but because it is not a unified assessment, the difficulty will be relatively higher. Weber thought that his guess was correct, but he was still a little depressed. He had studied for more than 2 years before being in the 3rd grade, but Marks McClown had only studied for 2 months. And it would take a year for normal people to complete it. Your studies. It's okay. Naturally, Marks McClown didn't care about the assessment in this area. Not to mention the increased difficulty. It didn't matter if he directly used the 4th grade assessment to deal with him. Plus, then he'll go and apply for the boss right away. Weber's little depression was quickly left behind by himself. Let's go together. Anyway, Marks McClown is fine now. Okay. A group of 2 walked to the working hall of the clock tower. Usually, no one would come here. Most students and lecturers were used to studying magic in their own place. There were only a few people in the huge office hall, and it seemed more and more empty. Right here, Weber led Mark's eye to an office window. A middle-aged man sat across the table, wearing a pair of very thick glasses. As if he didn't feel anyone walking in, his eyes were thick in his hands. Manuscript. Teacher, Weber called out. As soon as Weber's voice fell, a few sheets of paper flew out of the drawer, hanging in a row in front of Weber. Weber decided to see that it turned out to be a form for handling different business needs. Weber reached out and picked one for the upgrade assessment, and the remaining ones flew back. After filling in the names and grades one by one, the person behind the table looked at each other and finally raised his head and said suspiciously, "Marks McClown." As soon as Marks McClown completed the form, the piece of paper flew back to the man behind the table. Then he responded, "Well, it's me." Hearing the reply, the man frowned suddenly, reached out his hand to support his glasses, and glanced at the form again. His brows became more and more tight. Any questions? Weber had a bad premonition inexplicably, but he didn't know what went wrong. Go back. Don't mess around with me. Unexpectedly, the form that Mark's eye had just filled out would instantly turn into flying ashes when it fell into the hands of the teacher. The man waved his hand without leaving a trace of ashes. Marks McClown's eyes condensed. He was only here to apply for the assessment. Why would the group of people still stumble him on such a small matter? Seeing Marks McClown's cold eyes, Weber quickly asked, "Diaresis, what does teacher do? Isn't it normal for first-year students to apply for early assessment?" In fact, this incident is really not normal at first. Normally, only 80% of the students can pass the exam at one time after completing the basics of 1 year. So the remaining 2 Chengdu must re-enter the 1st grade. Every year there are 2 adults rereading. Inevitably some people feel that time is wasted. This early assessment system is mostly prepared for these people. That's why Weber said it was normal, but he overlooked one thing, that is Mark's eye's school time. The teacher glanced at Weber again, finally put down the book in his hand, and said, "Listen, this early review, because the lecturer who needs to be reviewed prepares in advance, it is more difficult than the normal review Qianzhao. If not, everyone thinks that they can apply for the assessment. Wouldn't the lecturer be exhausted? So Mark's eye, please go back and come back when you are ready, or directly participate in the collective assessment in September. Don't waste my money here." Time. As a lecturer in charge of the early assessment, if you feel that the student who is applying has no possibility of passing the assessment, you naturally have the right to refuse directly. As for Mark's eye, who had just entered school for 2 months, in his eyes, the possibility of passing the early assessment was a negative number. P.S. Ask for rewards and automatic subscription. Chapter 1254 Create the fastest upgrade record. This article is updated by Middle. Vomiting blood. like to remember to bookmark this site _. However, this is also because Marks McClown's luck is a bit bad. In the entire clock tower, almost everyone knows that he defeated more than a dozen senior students at once with the strength of a first grade. Plus. However, the lecturer in front of them is definitely a different kind of clock tower. What this instructor is pursuing is that he will never care about things that have nothing to do with him, and he will definitely not listen. It is precisely because of this that he will be the person in charge of this review. Right now, Marks McClown naturally didn't know this, but this teacher didn't have that kind of disdain and indifference in his eyes. It is estimated that he really felt that he did not have that strength. It's not necessary. I'm undoubtedly ready, Marks McClown said. Hey, how can you talk to you? You little baby can't understand, right? If you can pass the pre-approval just 2 months after enrolling in school, then the clock tower's on-year appraisal is not as good as it is once a month. Don't be angry. The teacher doesn't know. My boss is definitely a genius. This review will definitely pass, Weber said from the side. Who is not a genius in the clock tower? Don't 370 think that you can skip a level if you are a little better than others. This is done in advance. If you are not careful, you may get hurt. You don't want to join the fun. Plus. After hearing this, Marks McClown's eyes slowly eased. Is this teacher simply worried about him? Teacher, I'm really ready. Whether it's passed or not, I'm always ready. Marks McClown said again that he had no intention of conflicting with this teacher, but he had to participate in this test. If he really waited until September, many things would be too late. How are you? The teacher, who Marks McClown said was a little anxious. After a while, he turned into a helpless application again, took out a piece of paper, handed it to Marks I, and said, forget it, you can fill in another one. The time that Marks McClown and Wybosey stayed here is not too short, so the eyes of many people in the hall have gathered here. Naturally, not everyone is as blind as this lecturer. Isn't that Marks IBCCB? Soon someone recognized Marks I, the man in the clock tower recently. Well, it seems to be him. He just entered school. What will he do in the office? Someone asked. I just heard that I want to apply for an early upgrade assessment. After a period of silence, this small crowd exploded instantly. Marks McClown, upgrade assessment? The person who asked was stunned, as if he had never seen such an unbelievable thing before, and the others were not much different. Could it be that you got it wrong? Impossible. That position is the lecturer in charge of the review. If he hadn't applied for the upgrade assessment, could he still apply for the upgrade assessment? That said, everyone thought it was true, because the lowest level of assessment in the hands of the lecturer was the upgrade assessment between grades. But why do I still think it's impossible? When these people were talking, Marks McClown had already filled out the form and was ready to go back. When Marks McClown passed by them, although Marks McClown did not squint, the few people suddenly did not dare to say more. They forgot that when Marks McClown defeated more than a dozen senior grades alone, they were also saying that it was impossible, but Marks McClown did it. They all had such a terrifying record. Now they are just challenging an upgrade assessment. How can it not be done? It's just jealous. Whether it is jealous or unwilling, in short, the next day, Marks McClown will participate in the pre-assessment just 2 months after enrollment, and the whole school already knows. Marks McClown didn't say anything about this, but Weber was particularly helpless. Boss, you can be regarded as a well-known school now. In my opinion, the lecturer in charge of the review last time did not know your existence. As soon as he finished speaking, Weber raised his hand and patted his head. No, even he knows it now. Marks McClown turned his head and glanced at him, and said, what does it have to do with me? When is the review? Weber shrugged and said, 3 days later. The lecturer said that it was to give you a few more days of preparation time so as not to fail. He said that after a first-year student failed once, they can no longer apply for review for 3 months. Marks McClown was also a little helpless. He naturally didn't need these extra 2 days of preparation time, but he couldn't live up to the kindness of that person. Then wait, He also wants to see how much effect his mimic circuit can play in these 2 days. Right, Weber? Marks McClown suddenly shouted, with a slight smile on the corner of her mouth. But Weber shivered inexplicably, and said with a dry smile, "Boss ... What's the matter? I will be assessed soon. Will you practice your hands with me?" Obviously it was a questioning tone, but Weber looked at Mark's eyes, and he went around his mouth a few times and didn't come out. Okay. In the end Weber succumbed, and Xiao was worried about his life. "Let's go." Marks McClown stretched out his hand and picked up Weber's back collar, picking up the person and walking away like a chicken. Weber silently mourned for himself for 2 seconds. At the same time, on the other side of the clock tower, when they learned that Mark's eye was going to participate in the upgrade assessment, they began to become more uncomfortable, especially the aristocratic faction led by Johannes. To say that Johannes, although he is an absolute genius in this class of nobles, he has not applied for an early assessment for nothing else, because the number of early assessments is too small, the difficulty will increase accordingly, and those students who apply for the early assessment almost every year will participate after the unified assessment fails. Chapter 1255 Doomed to Fail. For automatic subscription, this article is updated by middle. Vomiting blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ Therefore, in their eyes, those who participated in the early assessment were just because they failed the unified assessment, and did not want to waste a year of rereading, but tried to find a little face through the early assessment. Plus. Therefore, Marks McClown's behavior is unheard of before. HMPH. Just let him be arrogant. If he fails the assessment this time, I will definitely want him to taste the taste of being cast aside by thousands of people. Johannes is still lying on the bed, but he is no longer wrapped in plaster, which shows how severe Marks McClown has caused him. As a magician, or a self-proclaimed aristocratic magician, being defeated in the arena and lying in bed for more than a month, this in itself is already a great shame. He must return this shame to Marks McClown thousands of times. Don't worry, this time he wants to pass the early assessment. He is wishful thinking. Newman was lying on one side, but there was a slight smile on his face, which shows that he is in a good mood today. Mark's eye. Mark's eye, if there is a way to heaven, if you don't walk, you have to find your own way. Does he think that after defeating a few people, he can easily pass the audit? If I remember correctly, upgrading the assessment requires an assessment of the magic circuit. Newman smiled gloomily. When Johannes heard these words, half a second later, the smile on his face got bigger and bigger. He smiled wantonly and said, "Ha, I almost forgot that Mark's eye, there is no magic loop. So this time he is dead," Johannes said with a smile, with a strange expression on his face. At the high-level meeting of the Magic Association on the other side, when Johannes was waiting to watch Mark's eye smash his head, this meeting was almost over. Everyone left in 2s and 3s, and the remaining few began to gossiping. "That Mark's eye seems to have news again," said a kind-eyed old man. "Well, I heard it. It means to participate in the early assessment." Another person echoed. Isn't he just 2 months into school? Still a strange flower without a magic circuit, right? You can learn magic without a magic circuit. Isn't that a precious sample? I advise you to stop thinking about it, that Mark's eye's strength is not weaker than many veteran magicians. Is that so? It seems that the clock tower needs another absolute genius, the old man said with a smile. That might not be the case. This assessment is not only about actual combat ability, another objected. But no matter what you say, Mark's eye's combat effectiveness is already recognized by everyone. Of course, this is only among the peers. They still think that Marks McClown is just a child, so their remarks are based on the perspective of the superior. I don't know what expressions these people should have if they truly realize Marks McClown's true strength in the future. For a while, It seemed that the entire Magic Association was discussing this assessment. Although this is a bit exaggerated, it is enough to see Mark-Si's popularity in the clock tower. On the other side, Marx McClown is a representative figure of the Populous faction, and the Populous faction naturally pays more attention to this review than anyone else. "Brother, isn't Mark-Si too impulsive this time?" a man with an anxious face asked. Yu Yifei, who was sitting across from him, glanced at him slowly and said, "What's the matter?" "Look, he has just entered school for 2 months. What can he learn? Even if he is a genius in combat effectiveness, but he doesn't have a magic circuit after all. Just take the assessment suddenly, in case he fails." He didn't finish the rest of the story. In case Mark-Si fails, then it is not Mark-Si alone, and the whole civilian group will be affected by that time. "Are you worried about him?" Yu Yifei said lightly. "This. How can you not worry?" "Don't you worry, brother, he will fail." Yu Yifei shook his head and said, "Why am I worried? Not to mention whether Mark-Si can pass the test. Even if he can't, don't forget, after all, he can't be regarded as a civilian from me. He and us time is just an agreement. Middle dot middle dot middle dot seeking flowers middle dot middle dot middle dot middle dot. Besides, do you think he is messing up? Do you think he can't pass the review without a magic circuit? If he is such a reckless person, it is not worthy of me to make friends like this before." Yu Yifei said that he himself knew that the magic circuit would be reviewed in advance, but he was not worried about Marx McClown. On the contrary, he was interested in the way Marx McClown passed the review. In other words, Yu Yifei basically believes that Mark-Si will definitely pass the review. Well, he is not such a rash person. After Yu Yifei said lightly, no one mentioned this matter again. "For the entire clock tower, I believe that Mark-Si can pass the audit." There should be only such a small group of people. Most people still think that Mark-Si is a bit too ignorant this time. And when the storm was surging in the clock tower, Mark-Si was still practicing against Weber on the rooftop. Said it was duet training, but it was actually Weber's unilateral beating. Like now, Marx McClown has a hockey puck with the size of his head, and Weber has been shrunk to the ground from the cold. He really doesn't understand. How could his boss be such a genius? How can those low-level magic tricks become so powerful in his hands? If he hadn't asked Mark-Si before, then Weber wouldn't believe that this guy didn't even have a magic circuit. "Boss, if you want to practice your hands, you should find someone better." Weber was about to cry. "Oh, how can you be my little brother with your strength?" Marx McClown waved his hand, and the ice ball as big as his head instantly evaporated, and Weber couldn't help his eyes widening after seeing this series of operations. Chapter 1256, Godlike Controllability. This article is updated by middle dot vomiting blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ What kind of magical controllability? Like a god. Although Weber can't fight or magic, he can be said to be extremely talented in observing magic. With only 2 movements, Mark-Si can basically analyze the use of Mark-Si's magic power. As if just now, he was able to evacuate the temperature around him in an instant, but he was able to control the evacuated area within a 1 circumference without affecting other places in the slightest. Weber has never seen such amazing magic manipulation ability in other lecturers. Under this circumstance, if Mark-Si is to engrave magically, then, "Boss, would you teach me?" Weber got up from the ground and asked hurriedly. "Forget it today. I still have something 3 to study, and I will teach you later." Marx McClown also knows the reason for Weber's lack of strength, but he hasn't been able to change this for the time being, not to mention that he has other plans. So it's better to study this magic circuit. The magic circuit that has just been formed is already very obvious to him when he performs magic, but Marx McClown feels that his mimic magic circuit that doubles Kenneth's magic circuit should be far more effective than this. But Weber obviously can't continue to practice with him. Okay, then he'll go out and have a look. "Boss, you study it hard." Before he finished speaking, Weber had already run dozens of meters away. 2 hours later, Weber returned. "Boss, They also opened an underground casino. Webber said with his head drooping back to the dormitory. Oh, what to bet on? Marks McClown raised an eyebrow and asked, bet on whether you can pass the review. When Webber thought of what he had just heard there, he was inexplicably frustrated. They said you don't know how high the world is, and they say you must not pass the first level. Although Webber had the intention to refute, he could dismiss everything else, but he didn't know how to speak about the magic circuit. After all, he couldn't be more clear that Marks McClown didn't have a magic circuit, and if he could, he wanted to send the magic engraving on his body to Marks McClown. But this family's engraving, even if it is the same family, can only be passed on to one offspring, let alone people outside the family. On the other hand, Webber also knew that his magic circuit was not excellent, and the magic engraving could not be compared with a big family like Kenneth and Marks McClown's strength. If he can possess a powerful and excellent magic engraving, then his future will be boundless. On this point, Webber was extremely clear. Webber thought that even if the magic engraving was poor, it would be better than none, so he couldn't help but say, "Boss," or "Webber, what about the odds in the underground casino?" Unexpectedly, Marks McClown suddenly asked, interrupting Webber's words directly. Odds? Webber was stunned for 2 seconds before speaking. What is this for? Marks McClown smiled and said, are you short of money? Webber was taken aback for a moment, and then he suddenly realized that the boss wanted to make a bet. If the boss loses, the odds are 1.1. If the boss wins, the odds are a full 50. When Webber went to see it at the time, he was angry at the odds. Later, when he saw the better, he was so angry that he almost did it. 1 point is fine, at least some earn. Ha ha. TSK. It was still 1 to 30 yesterday, but now it is 1 to 50. I think, even if it is adjusted to 1 to 100, no one will bet that Marks I will pass the test. Indeed, from the beginning to the present, no one bet on 2E and I to pass the review. If no one is betting on this, it is estimated that this casino will not be able to play. How could the odds become like this? Marks McClown touched his chin and said, obviously I have shown a strength far surpassing the average magician some time ago. No matter how you say it, it's impossible to be so dismissive, right, boss? Because there is an item in the assessment to assess the magic circuit, and everyone knows that you don't have a magic circuit. Webber said with his head down. So it's like this. Marks McClown smiled. Don't you believe me? Webber hesitated. He absolutely believed in the boss. With the boss's fighting power, even a magician who came to the sacrificial seat might not be able to beat the boss. However, as a magician, he knew everything about the magic circuit. Although he was born without a magic circuit, it is not impossible to have it through transplantation in the later stage, but the difficulty of the period. And when the boss first entered school, there was no magic circuit. It has only been 2 months, and the magic circuit is not a thing. Come here. Marks McClown asked Webber to come to him, bowed his head and said a few words in his ear. The smile on Webber's face grew bigger and bigger, and the original hesitation and worry disappeared without a trace. I'm going now. Webber went out after he finished talking, and took his wallet with him. By the way, he planned to borrow some money from his messenger friend Melvin Wins. Of course, the underground casino cannot be opened upright. The casino is actually opened in the backyard of a villa, but fortunately it is not far from the clock tower. When Webber passed, there were still many people in this underground casino, crowded around the side of Mark's eye. Second brother, how is it? Raise $300,000. 2.6 inches, said a man standing in the center. $300,000. Some of the people around couldn't help but take a breath. Although most of the people who participated in the betting are these noble people, they are generally not so lavish in this kind of entertainment. The people who started this meeting couldn't help but want to cry. P.S. Goes 2.0 plot looks really good. How can Dongide write such a level? Chapter 1257 Betting on Everything. For automatic subscription, this article is updated by middle. Vomiting blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _. Originally, he thought that there were too many big news about Mark's eye, and he heard something different every day, so he wanted to make some money from this person. But he didn't expect that from the opening to the present, only 2 people would win the bets here in Mark's eye. The 2 came after he raised the odds, and the 2 together only cost $10,000. He really didn't expect to be like this, just because it turned out that Marks McClown singled out more than a dozen senior students. He himself felt that it was impossible for Marks McClown to even pass this early assessment, so he felt that both sides the odds should not be much worse. But the reality later is that the gap between the 2 sides betting is too big. Now it is $300,000, and the gambling knight failed the assessment. Now, if Marks McClown really failed the assessment, wouldn't he be jumping off the building at a loss? The owner of the casino tremblingly accepted the $300,000. And the smile on his face was so embarrassing. Second brother is generous, but with so much money, at that time, I don't know whether the boss will pay it or not, said a man next to the second brother. The person called the second brother just snorted and looked at the boss sideways. The boss thinks badly. The person in front of him is not something he can afford. Don't worry, since the casino is open. Why can't it be said? The casino owner laughed and heard a clear voice shouting 2 meters away, $500,000. Mark's eye can pass the review. Like a huge rock slamming into the calm lake, everyone was shocked, turning their heads to see who was making such a big bet on the side that was almost certain to lose, including the boss and the second brother. And this bet is not someone else, it is Weber. This $500,000 is almost all the money that Weber can take out. And it is really all the belongings. Most of the money was borrowed by Weber from his friend Melvin Wins. This Melvin has funded Weber many times in the original history, including the air ticket money to go to Fuiuki City to participate in the Fourth Holy Grail War, and the money to buy the Elmira classroom in the future. So if the bet loses, then Weber will immediately be a poor man with nothing, and he will be in debt. But Weber knew that he would not lose. Boss, Weber looked at the group of people around who were obviously shocked, so he shouted again, Boss, I want to raise. Plus. Isn't this Weber? Someone in the crowd said softly, not loud, but all the magicians were present, and this voice naturally couldn't escape everyone's ears. Weber Wilbert, a successor who has only passed down 3 generations in a family, has average magic skills and average magic circuits. Kenneth is always making trouble for him. Recently, he found a boss named Mark's eye. The above is Weber in everyone's eyes. After a while, everyone's surprised eyes slowly changed color, and most of them were still contemptuous and disdainful. How can he have so much money in his situation? I'm afraid it's all the belongings. Maybe I borrowed the money. Then Mark's eye seems to be his boss, right? Oh, it's really like to gather together. The ironic voices did not change at all because of Weber's gamble. They were still stinging, but they were even more ridiculous because of the object of his bet. At any rate, it was a magician who had passed on for 3 generations, but he was a kid who didn't even have a magic circuit. TSK Tusk. How should I put it? It's really a protector. I would rather use all my belongings to save Mark's eye's face. Ha ha. A shrill laughter popped out from the crowd. As soon as this sound came out, the people around stopped making a sound. When Weber looked up, he was shocked. There was even a cold sweat behind his back. This guy is even more offensive than Johannes. But no matter what, his face can't be lost, let alone the boss face. Neil Eddy. Weber quietly clenched his fists in his sleeves and raised his head to meet him. My second brother's name, you can also call it. Amos Eddy stood up from Neil. His slender eyebrows furrowed tightly, looking at Weber as if he was about to eat him raw. Neil Eddy and Amos Eddy are the second and third brothers in the family. Because their eldest brother died young, Neil Eddy inherited the magic engraving in the family. They are also one of the few nobles. Many brothers have excellent feelings. Normally, the 2 brothers should fight to the death for this magic engraving, but the 2 brothers are extremely strange, and there is no dispute at all. The elder brother Neil Eddy's character is extremely arrogant and domineering, but his younger brother Amos Eddy defends his second elder brother extremely, Almost obediently, Weber has always had no good feelings about these 353 brothers. One is that he is always bullied because he can't provoke him, and the other is that every time he sees the two brothers staying together, the atmosphere between the two makes him feel uncomfortable. Simply weird. But since I met here today, he won't walk around as usual. Since listening to the boss said that, Weber felt that let alone an upgrade assessment, it was a direct graduation assessment, and the boss had no problem. And these people are still thinking about watching the boss joke. Haha. Originally, he just wanted to bet the money and then withdrew, just waiting to come back and get the money. But now seeing this group of people, he suddenly had other thoughts. When Weber thought about it, his heart trembling because of fear suddenly calmed down. He raised his head and smiled and said, I just made a bet, why can't I say hello? P.S. Ask for a reward in full order. Chapter 1258 Streaking. Please subscribe automatically. This article is updated by Vomiting Blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ the bet of $500,000. Weber, you really did your best. I'm a little envious that Mark-Sai has you as a little brother. Plus how? You probably don't even have the money to eat now, right? Said sarcastically. This sentence hits Weber's pain point. He does not have much money now. But Weber spread his hands and said, you are right, I have no money. However, tomorrow is the audit. Tomorrow night, I guess I will have more money than you, Neil Eddy. $500,000. One night, 50 times. Although their magicians don't care how to make money, they can be a little happy if they spend so much money in one night. Haha, do you just believe that Mark-Sai can win? If Neil Eddy didn't care about his identity, he could bend over with a smile here. What is this joke? If Mark-Sai, who has no magic circuit, can pass the review, he can immediately apply for the pre-graduation review. That's $200,000. Neil also placed a lot of bets. Why, are you so sure that Mark-Sai will lose? Weber asked rhetorically. Sure? He will definitely lose. Neil Eddy didn't doubt this point of view. Second brother, Amos on one side pulled his brother's clothes and whispered a few words in his ear. After a while, I saw Neil Eddy smiled brightly and said to Weber, since you believe that Mark-Sai so much, why don't we take a gamble? Weber was taken aback for a moment, and then immediately said, okay, what are you betting on? Weber knew his boss would win, so he didn't worry at all about Neil Eddy's tricks. I have a ceremonial costume, named Jugongjie, which can supplement 80% of the mana consumption of most low-level magic when releasing magic. If Mark-Sai passes the test, this ceremonial costume is yours. As soon as Neil said this, there were sudden exclamations around him. Everyone knows that the Eddy family is already the 6th generation, and its family strength should not be underestimated, and Neil's own strength and good quality. The attire taken out of his hand is enough to make many people coveted. But although this temptation is tempting, it is one thing whether Weber can get it. What if Mark-Sai didn't pass? Someone in the crowd asked for Weber. If it doesn't pass, then you Weber Velvet will take off his clothes and go around the clock tower. No. 2 times. Amos couldn't wait to shout. Weber frowned suddenly. The people around also began to laugh, as if they had seen Weber running wildly with his ass naked. Weber was embarrassed by the various gazes of the people around him. If he was still interested in Neil's attire just now, he now has other ideas. Okay, but Weber straightened his waist and said, I don't want your magic attire either. If my boss passes the review, then you, Neil Eddy, will take off your clothes and run around the clock tower twice. How dare you dare to bet? God. What is this development? This Weber, is it crazy? Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Then if Mark-Sai passes ... Master Neil. Neil Eddy glared fiercely at the person who had just spoken. What does it mean if Mark-Sai passed? That is impossible. To block the contemporary reputation of his Eddy's home, he, Neil Eddy, will not let Mark-Sai pass the review. Dare to provoke him so much. Neil Eddy, Weber will wit. You are dead. Good. Neil replied. Second brother. Amos panicked instantly, And if Mark's eye really passed, wouldn't his brother really want to run naked? He would never allow such things to happen. Why, even you think that Mark's eye might win. Neil waited for his brother and said, Amos didn't know what to say. Mark's eye passed the assessment. It was impossible in his opinion. He was sure to die in the magic circuit round. But once this happened to his brother, I can't help thinking about that in case. Then it's set. Everyone here is all witnesses. Neil, do you have any opinion? Webber said. I'm waiting to see the day when you fulfill your promise. I hope you are really a person who keeps your promise. Otherwise, I don't mind sending someone to invite you to the garden. Neil turned around after saying this. Of course, I just hope you don't forget your promise. The thought that the arrogant Neil Eddy would streak around the clock tower twice because he lost his bet, Webber couldn't stand his excitement. Quickly hand over the raise money to the boss. And Webber took the list and went back. That kind of thing happened. And Mark's eye was also happy when he heard what Webber was talking about. He didn't even know that he was disapproved by so many people. Go to sleep, wait for a good show tomorrow, Marks McClown said. Webber nodded. He could almost imagine the scene. He was so excited inside and out. He tossed about in bed without falling asleep. Chen Li's Zai first appeared, breaking the night. And it was the next day's early review. The review site was on the second floor of the office hall. It happened that most students didn't have classes today. What's more, the scene of the casino yesterday was seen by many people. So this early office was surrounded by people. Of course, they were not here to do errands, but to watch the show. Many people even have crystal balls in their hands and plan to look outside when they can't get in for a while. Boss, I found that since you entered the school, the entire clock tower has been a lot of lively. Webber walked beside Mark's eye and said with emotion. Chapter 1259, The Presence of the Monarchs. This article is updated by Vomiting Blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _. This is a good thing, Marks McClown replied lightly. Boss, what you said yesterday is really true. Webber asked again. It's not that he didn't believe it, but that this kind of thing is really incredible, not to mention that he grew up so big. Even the family's father and grandfather may have never seen such a genius in magic. Even Kenneth's kind of great genius recognized by the entire Magic Association can instantly become a firefly next to the moon when compared with Marks McClown. Besides, Kenneth, Marks McClown must be assessed in advance. He must have known it, and he didn't take it seriously. As one of the 12 monarchs of the clock tower, he couldn't be more clear about the content of the assessment. And Marks McClown didn't have a magic circuit, and he couldn't be more clear about this matter. So Kenneth felt that he didn't need to look at it, and Mark's eye would definitely not pass. But as Mark's eye's lecturer, he was still there. Surprisingly, the 12 sovereigns of the clock tower, who are usually rarely seen, are assessed in advance today, and there are only 4 people including Mark's eye. But there are a total of 357. The monarch is present. This is unprecedented. After Marks McClown arrived at the scene, he realized that he was not the only one who was assessed in advance today. The other 3, without exception, have not passed the unified assessment last year. The second floor looks like a huge stadium, with an empty space in the middle, surrounded by seats on the first floor, and a podium directly in front with a row of seats on the stage. The open space in the center is divided into 4 areas from small to large, and different content is assessed respectively. After everyone arrived, Marks McClown was taken to the center of the venue by the lecturer in charge and joined the other 3 people, while Webber went to the viewing platform. The seats around were already crowded, and it took Webber a long time to find a seat. That's Webber. I heard that he bet with that Eddie's family, and if he loses, he will run naked. TSK, this bet is really big. And it's from Eddie's. As soon as Webber sat down, a lot of gossip sounded around him. Just wait for a good show. Webber just thought he hadn't heard him, and sat up straight and looked at the examination place. Okay. Everyone is here. I won't say much about the rules. As you all know, there are a total of 4 assessments, and all of them are considered to be passed. Now the first magic power assessment will begin immediately. It was Kenneth who was talking, and after speaking lightly, he turned back to his seat and sat down. Although this kind of assessment is a bit difficult, it is not very rare, so there is no need to say more. Anyway, the purpose of so many people here today is well known. If not, usually these pre-assessments usually come with a few classmates and friends who have a good relationship with the examiner. How can it be like today? The 12 monarchs have come 5. After Kenneth announced the start, the other 3 couldn't help but glance at Marks McClown. Today's battle should be because of this guy named Marks I, right? I just don't know what the 5 monarchs think, but one thing is for sure. These monarchs, who are rarely seen in ordinary times, rarely appear in schools if they are not giving lectures. If they are doing well today, which monarch will look at? It will be different in the future. Thinking of this, the 3 of them were a little eager to try. On the other hand, Marks McClown still had a calm face, standing there without even moving his eyes. Good seedling. An old man on the podium stroked BCDH his beard and sighed, but the moment he turned to see Kenneth, he swallowed the rest of the words. He wanted to say that it was not much better than Kenneth back then. But even though he felt so, it was too early to draw conclusions so early. Compared with Kenneth when he was young, Marks McClown would definitely win the battle directly from the aspect of combat effectiveness. Although Marks I singled out more than a dozen senior students alone, it was only a rumor, but the rumor did not necessarily have much credibility, because the clock tower was not so prone to groundless things. These students, if not many people, have seen it with their own eyes. I am afraid they will not spread so quickly. But Kenneth's genius lies in that too-good magic circuit, and that incomparable mind. In the research of spiritualism, no one can dominate the entire clock tower. As for the clock tower, a clever brain is obviously more respected than a powerful person. This is also a strange place. Marks McClown and Kenneth have nothing to do with him. The only connection is that Marks McClown fought with Kenneth before entering the clock tower and defeated Kenneth. The other is the various conflicts between the two in class. But even so, there are always people who can't help but compare Marks I with Kenneth at the time. The main reason is that although this clock tower has many geniuses, there are not many such outstanding geniuses. Therefore, it is almost inevitable that Marks McClown was compared with Kenneth. This is the main reason why Kenneth came to see this review. For him, all of Marks I's previous victories were obtained in a flattering way, and even the battle that made him famous for the entire clock tower was unbelievable in Kenneth's view. Marks McClown's fighting method shouldn't be a magician's fighting method at all. It's not so much that Kenneth has always been brooding about losing to Marks I, it's better to say that he doesn't admit that he lost to Marks I at all. So Kenneth wants to see this review. He wants to prove to himself that it is impossible for someone like Marks I to compete with him in magic. Except for that despicable way of fighting, Marks I couldn't compare with him at all. Kenneth wants everyone to see that Marks I is not worthy to be a magician. Chapter 1260, Magic is My Strength. This article is updated by Vomiting Blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ Kenneth leaned on the chair and watched someone set up a crystal for testing. Plus, this is a simple magic circle, which is used to test the magic power value of the magician. The usage is very simple. You only need to input the magic power of the body into the crystal ball. The crystal ball will convert the input magic power into a liquid, just by observing the amount of water in the crystal ball. The tester's magic value can be judged. Before the start, someone will check whether a few people wear demon-filling attire to avoid cheating. The inspection is complete. The lecturer in charge of the inspection shouted towards the podium. Kenneth kept staring at Marks McClown with his eyes, but Marks McClown didn't feel the same at all. HMPH. You'll know it looks good in a while. You'll know the consequences of fighting in that nasty way in a while. You'll know what a real magician is like in a while. You'll know in a while. I have no qualifications to compare with me. The test begins. Kenneth shouted, feeling comfortable, as if he had seen Marks I's shame under the eyes of the public. After all, even if the magic power in Mark's Eye's body is enough for him to pass this test. But without the increase of the magic circuit, it will still be the bottom of the ranking. No matter how bad the magic circuit of the other three is, it is definitely better than Mark's Eye without the magic circuit. Plus, after studying magic for so many years, Kenneth firmly believed in this. Come on, Mark's Eye, let so many people see the true face of you, a so-called magician who is so polite. At the same time, the eyes of many spectators on the field are almost all on Marks McClown. All of them are magicians, and they all understand how important the magic circuit is to a magician. And what kind of performance would Marks McClown, a magician without a magic circuit, behave? Marks McClown naturally knew that many people were staring at him, but he looked like he didn't feel it at all. With Mark's Eye's mental power, if he wanted to know, he would know if someone glared at him about a kilometer away. But if he doesn't want to know, even if you stare at him in front of him, Mark's Eye can pretend not to see it. At this time, Marks McClown was watching the first person to test. The test sequence is random, and Mark's Eye is ranked last. The first person to test was a man about the same age as Weber. He didn't seem to be very talented, otherwise Weber is in the 3rd grade. And this guy is still here to participate in the pre-assessment. Through the exploration of mental power, Marks McClown found that this crystal ball was actually a little clever. The ornament diameter area around the crystal ball is a vacuum zone of magic, that is to say, as long as someone walks in front of the crystal ball, the magic in the surrounding air cannot be used. However, this crystal ball isolates the magic power, but cannot isolate Marks McClown's spiritual power. And he also found that there was a marked line on the crystal ball, which was clearly written from 0 to 100. As soon as the test student walked in front of the crystal ball, he felt as if someone was staring at him, and the sight of him was a little cautious. The student turned his head and saw that there was no half of a person around him. The people waiting for the test were all standing a few meters away. The teacher of the test was staring at the crystal ball and no one was looking at him, but he just felt that there was a sight hovering over him. Around. What happened? The teacher who was observing the crystal ball looked up at him strangely, and said, "Why haven't we started yet?" The student was stunned, feeling his sight disappeared. "Sorry. Start right away." The student finally put his hands on the crystal ball. The teacher glanced at him displeasedly, then moved his gaze to the scale of the crystal ball. A few meters away, Marks McClown silently raised her mouth and smiled silently. The test has finally officially started. I saw the student slowly inputting magic power into the crystal ball. The crystal ball that was originally empty suddenly poured drops of crystal liquid from the bottom, and the liquid slowly piled up. Every time a tick mark passed, the number next to it would light up. At first, the fluid gushed out extremely fast, and it reached the 20 position in the blink of an eye, but then it started to slow down, and it took a while to rise to the 30 position, and the students in the test were already sweating. Middle dot middle dot middle dot find flowers middle dot 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 middle dot. The unified test of the upgrade, as long as the magic value exceeds 50, but this is an advanced test, so it must exceed 60 to pass. Kenneth on the stage glanced at it and then stopped watching. At this level, the unified test may not be able to pass. But I don't know where the guts to participate in the advanced test, commonly known, swollen face to fill up fat. The people on the stage also had some dissatisfied voices. They came here today, not to see this guy. I don't know if I tested at home in private. It's a shame to go to such a place. That's a waste of time. Marks McClown is the number 1. It seems to be the 4th. Fortunately, there are only 4 people in total. Call me when Mark's Eye arrives. The sweat on the heads of the students on the stage is getting more and more, and I don't know whether it is caused by too much input of magic power, or is anxious by the surrounding sounds. If it fails to pass this time, the magic engraving of the family will have no hope. Thinking of this, the student gritted his teeth again and poured the last trace of magic power into the crystal ball. Finally, the surging transparent liquid stabilized, and the level stopped at the 35 position. This level, let alone an early review, even a unified review, will not pass, especially from the back to above the 40. The widest position of the crystal ball, even if it rises by 1 centimeter, it will be more difficult for a long time than the front rise by 10 centimeters. The audit failed. The auditing teacher glanced at him, and pronounced the sentence of failure blankly. The student lowered his head and walked down. When he passed the second person, Marks McClown clearly heard the person sneer, "It's shameful to be embarrassed to be here." Chapter 1261, Combat Power Detector. This article is updated by middle. Vomiting blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ The student with his head down clenched his fist, speeding up and leaving the field. Marks McClown raised his head to look at the second person, a handsome red-haired young man who still had a sullen face when he was talking, but when he walked onto the test bench, he turned into a sunny smile. After looking at this person interestingly, Marks McClown withdrew his gaze. As soon as the red-haired young man went up, some girls cried out in the surrounding stands. It seems that it is quite popular. Marks McClown thought to herself, but she didn't know what her strength was. Approved. The magic value is 86. Soon, the audit teacher gave the answer. 86. It's so high? At that time, when I reviewed it, it was 65.323. I'm going, "Who is this?" You can see the reaction of those girls. Handsome and strong. It's literally, "I am worthy of being my male god." A girl cried out of joy. "What? It's obviously my male god," another girl shouted. Marks McClown raised her eyebrows. "Can't you see that this guy is still so pleasing to girls?" The red-haired youth on the stage bowed to the review teacher and the monarch on the rostrum, with a humble smile on their faces. This move made many girls be moved by it. If he hadn't heard what this person said just now, I guess Marks McClown would think this is a very good person. Sure enough, people can't look good. Kenneth on the stage looked down and smiled, leaning back on the seat, holding his hands together, playing with the gem ring on his right thumb. After this test, the face of the third person who followed suddenly turned dark. The score of the person in front was so high, it was a nightmare for him. But when I think about their Marks I who doesn't even have a magic circuit behind him, the face of number 3 is better. Approved. The magic value is 69. The number 3 was also passed, and the results were not too good, not too bad, so there was no big response at the scene. And the 5 monarchs on the stage had no ideas at all. In their opinion, this result is basically the same as number 1. Number 3 sighed and turned and walked down, but when she saw Marks I, she felt a sense of watching a good show. This guy. Marks McClown naturally noticed his thoughts, but he didn't want to say anything. He just wanted to think whatever he wanted. Next, the teacher on stage shouted. Marks McClown replied and walked up. "It's Marks I." "Look, it's Marks I's turn." "Get up. Marks I is on stage." "You said, Marks I will pass or not?" This question should be the two of Eddies who are more worried. Eddies? You haven't heard of such a big thing? It's the Neil Eddy who is said to bet with Weber Velvet that if Marks I passes the test, Neil Eddy will run around the clock tower naked twice. On the contrary, that's Weber will wit running naked for 2 laps. Damn, really? That Neil Eddy? No matter who it is, it's a complete show. Neil Eddy in the crowd didn't see any anxiety at all when he heard these words. Instead he looked in the direction of Weber not far away and gave him a provocative look. "You should cry in a while," Weber whispered and turned to look at Marks I in the field. When Marks McClown came on stage, not only was it so lively in the stands, but even the 5 monarchs on the stage sat upright in unison. Seeing this scene, the 3 people who had just tested it suddenly showed envy, jealousy and hatred. Especially on the second, he thought he should be the one who has attracted much attention. But on second thought, most of these people should come to watch the excitement. When Marks I fails to pass the review for a while, It should be more lively then. Thinking about it this way, number 2 and number 3 both showed a joking smile. Let's start. The teacher also glanced at Marks McClown before saying, "Okay." Marks McClown replied, and put his hands on the crystal ball. At the same time, the huge venue was quiet almost instantly. Everyone can't wait to hold their breath, and then come to Mark's side to see. Inside the crystal ball, transparent water droplets that symbolized the value of magic power popped out quickly. The numbers on the magic scale line lit up one after another. In the blink of an eye, it passed 50. If this is placed on the unified assessment, it has already passed. But the liquid in the crystal ball has no tendency to stagnate at all, and even the speed of the liquid coming out has not slowed down at all. So everyone stared dumbfounded at the liquid level slowly and unstoppably towards the 60 mark. 60. This has passed. But it hasn't stopped yet. After 60 years, the ascent speed increased significantly, because the higher the upper level, the smaller the horizontal plane, and Mark's eye's input of magic power remains the same. So the ascent speed is faster. Before everyone reacted, it was already 70. However, it didn't stop. After the average person reaches the 60 or 70th mark, the speed will slow down, although the less magic power is needed at the back, but the magic power in the tester's body will become less and less. Look at Mark's eye. But there is no lack of magic 4.0 performance. Not even a drop of sweat on his forehead. This scene shocked everyone present in an instant. What's the situation? Look at that Mark's eye. There is no effort at all. It must be pretend. How do I think it's not? Stop it. 75. My God. How long is this? When the tick mark was moving towards 80, Neil Eddy got up from his seat with a chuckle. Chapter 1262. Do you want to burst it? This article is updated by middle. Vomiting blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ Neil Eddy's face turned black with ugliness. How is this possible? Neil Eddy looked at the rising tick mark in disbelief, and the dazzling number 80 that slowly lit up. 80. Second brother. Amos was so scared that his face was pale and pale. How could he never imagine that a person who didn't even have a magic circuit would have such a huge magic power in his body? Amos couldn't help but feel weak at the thought of his second brother betting on his bet with Weber. Amos. Neil gritted his teeth and called his third brother's name. Second brother. This is impossible. He must have cheated. Amos shouted without a word. Cheat. Neil grabbed Amos by the collar and shouted at him with a dark face. Why didn't you cheat? You were only 76 when you were in the first grade. Why didn't you cheat? And in the presence of so many clock tower monarchs, you have the ability to cheat me. See if they can tell. Whoever has not participated in this assessment, let alone this extremely strict pre-assessment, is a teacher staring at these 4 people. Even during the unified assessment, there is absolutely no possibility of cheating. Amos was almost crying. He also knew that it was impossible to cheat successfully, but in this situation, it seems that only cheating is possible. Or else let the second brother run naked for 2 laps. Amos suddenly thought of something, and hurriedly shouted, second brother, waiting for the next round. The next round is the review of magic knowledge. Then Mark's eye has only learned less than 2 months, and she doesn't understand. Hearing this, Neil's face finally looked better, so he loosened Amos' collar and said, you better expect this to be the case. The thought that if he loses, he will run naked for 2 laps, and Neil's face is hard to look at. Let him go naked? Might as well kill him directly. Let's talk about Mark's eye here. While he was inputting magic power into the crystal ball, he was thinking about how much magic power the crystal ball could withstand. If it exploded, would it be too public? It's no wonder that he thinks so, because he hasn't used his full strength yet. And the tick mark is already onto the 93 position. That's 93. Even Kenneth didn't have this value when he first enrolled in school. and Mark Sai had only just entered school for 2 months. 2 months. 93 magic value. This time even Kenneth couldn't sit still, holding the chair next to him tightly with both hands. If the chair wasn't hard enough, Kenneth would probably crush it. How can that be? Marks McClown's spiritual power is already so huge. How can he achieve the same huge magical power? This unscientific. This is not magic. Moreover, the water in the crystal ball is still rising. Is this going against the sky? Many people in the audience stood up and watched. This is really incredible. For so many years, no one can achieve such a high value in the magic test of the clock tower. Of course, if the current monarchs were to do this test, the crystal ball would have exploded, but none of them had this value. And Mark Sai, this Mark Sai, actually 95, 96. 100, full. The crystal ball is full. The magic of Mark Sai successfully lit the entire scale. Moreover, Marks McClown's hand did not leave the crystal ball. That is to say, he was still inputting magic power. In fact, as far as Marks McClown is concerned, it is not that surprising. With the magic power in his body and the current magic circuit, even if there are 10 more crystal balls, it will blow up. But the people around don't know this. They only know that this freshman who has just entered school for 2 months is full of magic test crystal balls. The expressions of the 3 people standing behind Mark Sai were uglier than the other. Especially number 2. It's hard to see the extreme. Originally, the focus of this assessment should be him. Kenneth's face on the stage was so good that he couldn't see where it went, but the other monarchs reacted differently, and their eyes lit up. At this time, a clear click sounded, and the crystal ball cracked. Only then did the review teacher react from the shock, and quickly stopped and said, "It's okay, it's okay. No more magic power." Marks McClown retracted his hand only then, and when he raised his head, no trace of fatigue was seen on his face. Approved. The magic value is 100. With the voice of the reviewing teacher, the audience was boiling. Some are shocked, some do not believe, some are surprised, some disagree, some are jealous. Various sounds exploded on the audience stage. 100. Fucking God. Unbelievable. 233. Did he use a fake crystal ball? I also think this is not a fake, right? Neil Eddy had a dark face, listening to the teacher's announcement that Marks McClown had obtained a full score of magic power. His anger couldn't be suppressed anyway. Especially on the other side, Weber gave him a provocative look. Weber was also shocked at first, but instantly turned into joy. The boss is too good at hiding his strength. Even he didn't know that the boss has such a huge magic power. In fact, Weber blamed Marks McClown for this. It wasn't that he wanted to hide his strength. In fact, it was just because the enemies he encountered were too weak and Marks McClown could not use any powerful magic power at all, so they were so shocked. Of course, if Weber knew that this was less than a 10th of Marks McClown's true strength, he still didn't know what to be shocked. "Huh. What are you proud of?" A cold voice sounded above Weber's head. Chapter 1263. Are you wrong? Exclamation mark. This article is updated by middle. Vomiting blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ Weber was stunned for a moment, lowered his smile, and turned to look at him. It turned out to be Johannes, who was almost good. Why, the injury is healed. Weber poked his sore spot as soon as he spoke, but Johannes was unexpectedly lifeless. Don't be smug. This is just a test of magic power. Don't forget that Marks McClown has no magic circuit at all. Moreover, he is at most a reckless man with strong combat effectiveness. What kind of magician? Your family didn't tell you that the magician is. Do you need to rely on this? Johannes looked at Weber contemptuously, and pointed his head. Really? Then wait and see. Weber was too lazy to talk to him, turned around and stopped talking. Johannes thought he was showing timidity, and suddenly laughed more wanton. Quite a few people around have slowed down. Yes, Mark Sai has no magic circuit, so how do you understand those mysterious magic theories? And it seems that he is only fighting fiercely, But this upgraded early assessment is not just an assessment of combat effectiveness. In the clock tower, not only the strength in combat, but also the strength in research, that is, IQ and knowledge, are more important than pure combat effectiveness. And now the order of the clock tower is not only arranged according to combat effectiveness, but mostly magicians with super combat effectiveness but not high rank. Plus, if Marks McClown really only has combat power and no brains, then it is actually not that worthy of people. But is this really the case? Be quiet. Kenneth stood up and shouted. The court slowly fell silent, and then he said, "Prepare for the magic knowledge test." After speaking, Kenneth sat down with a strange expression on his face. The audience who recovered from the shock just now began to chat in a low voice. The next test can be said to be the focus of their review, because almost everyone knows the entire clock tower that Mark's Eye has no magic loop. And how can people without magic circuits learn magic theory? In their view, explaining magic theory to a person without a magic circuit is more difficult to understand than playing the piano. But what is the truth? Just look at the next test. The number one that failed the last round has been eliminated, and the remaining talents are eligible to continue the test. The test of this magic theory is not coming in order, directly 3 people, 1 table and chair, sitting in the center of the huge arena. The academic assessment is through examination papers, similar to examinations. When the test paper was sent down, Marks McClown clearly felt the sight of the 2 people next to him, and he knew why without thinking about it. Most of the content of the exam is about magic and magic circuits. Marks McClown just lowered his head and glanced, and then began to answer the questions. The second and third on the left were stunned, and the same question flashed in their minds. How did Mark's Eye do it so fast? He didn't answer the questions indiscriminately. However, after a while, the 2 of them also started to answer the questions. There is a time limit for this early assessment. Because it is an early assessment, the answering time is no less than the unified assessment, which is 20 minutes less. For them, it is undoubtedly a great pressure. The surrounding voice is gradually decreased, watching their answers quietly. However, the 2 sitting beside Mark's Eye were already panicked before they even started, because Mark's Eye next to him has already started writing the second test. It's like taking an exam, especially a big exam. Every time someone turns over the paper, I feel nervous. In this assessment, there were only 3 people in total, and Marks McClown's actions undoubtedly increased the pressure on the other 2. Marks McClown has written the second one. Are you wrong? The people who were close to the court had already started to speak in surprise. No, that guy is really writing the second one. I guess it's the first exam questions, right? I think so too. Not most people think so, but basically everyone except Weber. What they all know is that Mark's Eye's combat effectiveness is super strong, but in this clock tower, who knows that this brain is more important than combat effectiveness? On the other hand, the reason why so many people believe that Marks McClown will definitely fail the assessment is also because Marks McClown does not have a magic circuit. It is impossible to learn these magic theories. Even Kenneth felt this way. Even though he was a lecturer in the Mark's Eye spirit dropping class, he had seen Mark's Eye's intellectual excellence, but there were some things that could not be learned with a little brain. It is also worth mentioning that none of the questions in the assessment content this time was about spiritualism, because from Kenneth's point of view, Marks McClown is extremely talented in spirituality, so if that's the case, it's good to let him not encounter the subject that he is good at. Thinking of this, Kenneth felt more relieved and looked at the other 2 people doing the question with interest. Iris's teacher, M. Dunn. In the quiet examination room, a faint voice seemed to grow wings. Zhao Zhao instantly flew into everyone's ears. Marks McClown, is he done? Even Kenneth, including the monarchs around him, sat upright. The stands were even more noisy. This guy, didn't he hand in the paper for nothing, right? It must be a blank roll. Weber will wit, just watch it. Johannes said excitedly. Weber didn't look back, staring at the examination paper in Mark's Eye's hand. There was no tension in his heart, but rather excited, felt that he would soon see Joanna's astonished expression. The most powerful mage of Harry Potter Chapter 1264 Condescending Answers. This article is updated by middle. Vomiting blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ Weber felt that he would immediately let others know that his boss was not a brash man who could only fight. His boss is a real genius. Okay. Then you hand it in. Even the invigilator was stunned for a moment. How long is this? After receiving the full examination papers written by Marks McClown, the invigilator still couldn't believe it, and hurriedly walked to the rostrum and handed it to the monarchs above. Originally, this test paper should be reviewed by himself, but now that there are 5 of the 12 monarchs, it is not his turn to live. The 5 monarchs looked different, but they all quickly reviewed the examination papers. These topics may be difficult for these students, but for them, there are some pediatrics. As for why the faces are different, then there are reasons for each. The test paper was finally passed to Kenneth. Kenneth, who was still careless, was stunned the moment he looked down and saw the exam paper. These questions are very simple for Kenneth, but he also knows that these questions are of hell level for a first-year student. If Mark's answer was only correct, it wouldn't make Kenneth so gaff. But his answer is clearly written in a top-down attitude of 273. This is obviously not like a person who has only been in contact with magic for more than 2 months, but like a person who has studied magic for a long time. Suddenly saw such a simple question and wrote the answer by hand. The preciseness of his words and the ingenuity of his problem-solving thoughts made Kenneth, who is known as the genius among the geniuses, unable to pick a mistake. A perfect answer. Normally, if Kenneth had a student who could hand in such an answer sheet, he might be happy about it. But now it is different. The master of this answer is Marks McClown. It's that Marks who doesn't even have a magic circuit. The originally flat test paper was almost torn apart in Kenneth's hands. After a while, he calmed down. Looking at the 4 bright red S's in the front of the score sheet, Kenneth finally picked up a pen. S grade. After getting the score, the lecturer was also taken aback. The 5 monarchs were all S. To say that this Sleeville evaluation is actually not that difficult, as long as the lecturer is in a good mood and the answer is outstanding, there will usually be several S's. But that is the level given by the usual lecturer. In the clock tower, if you want to get an S in the hands of the monarch, even an S is enough to walk sideways on the clock tower. Especially when I meet some picky monarchs, like Kenneth, let alone S, it's good to get a D in their hands. But this Marks turned out to be 5 S's. I am afraid that the entire Magic Association cannot find another person to achieve this. At the same time, the answers of the other 2 were also handed in. After everyone's score level is determined, it is time to announce the results. The 3 stood side by side, and in front of them was the auditor with 3 score sheets. Joshua Gore McClown's number 2 walked out, still humble. The highest grade is B+, the lowest grade is E+. Comprehensive evaluation. The academic assessment grade is C, and the assessment passed. The lecturer shouted expressionlessly, "Thank you, teacher." Number 2 bowed as usual. This time Marks McClown didn't miss the triumph and excitement that flashed through his eyes. It is enough for him to get this score when all 5 graders are at the monarch level. C. Too great, right? Well, after all, not all of the 12 monarchs are as strict as Director Kenneth. What? Joshua has always been great. Okay. Awesome. Hearing the discussion around him, the triumphant expression in No.2's eyes became heavier, and he even looked back at Marks McClown provocatively. Marks McClown was helpless, wondering when he developed a mysterious competitive mentality with himself. You are happy when you are happy. It's okay to see what I do. Do you still think that this little achievement is enough to show off to me? Kerry Chapman. The lecturer then called the number 3 in. Number 3 stepped forward with a nervous expression. Marks McClown could see that the sweat on the back of his head could flow into the collar. The highest grade is C+, the lowest grade is D+. Comprehensive evaluation, D+, approved. The lecturer was still expressionless. But number 3 seemed to have come back from a ghost gate, and his whole body felt like an afterthought. Marks McClown felt that if not so many people were watching, he could faint directly. Marks sigh. The lecturer finally shouted Marks McClown's name and looked up at him, his eyes full of suspiciousness. McClown's. Marks McClown stepped forward calmly. It's that Marks sigh. TSK. It's over, it's over. McClown, it's not that Kenneth has always disliked him. In this case, as long as you say hello to the other monarchs, even if Marks I can answer the question, he may not pass. Besides, he is likely to pass the paper. Wow, it's finally Marks I, guess it's C or F. Ha. If there is a G in this evaluation, it is estimated that he is a G. Hearing the words around him, Weber suddenly became a little nervous. He forgot that although this test is highly anticipated, this one is also a test of luck. If it is really like the person next to it, it can be oh no, impossible. Marks I must be the highest. Weber said. Before the person next to him had spoken, Johannes, who was sitting on top of Weber, laughed out. Are you still awake? Just that Marks I only know that there is nothing to fight, and there is no magic circuit. If he can have a D, I will eat. Before Johannes finished speaking, he heard the voice of the reviewing lecturer coming from the underground. The most powerful mage of Harry Potter Chapter 1265 Earth-shattering results. This article is updated by middle. Vomiting blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ Marks I, the highest evaluation S, the lowest evaluation S, comprehensive evaluation S, approved. The audience was shocked when he said this. What? Even the lowest rating is S grade? In other words, all the 5 monarchs are given Marks I S grade evaluation. What is this concept? It is in everyone's mind that the name Marks McClown exploded at the same moment. How can that be? Yay. Weber almost jumped up excitedly. After the excitement, he stood up, turned his head to look at Johannes, and smiled. You just said, if my boss has a D, what would you eat? As if he hadn't heard Weber at all, Johannes stiffened his body without even closing his mouth. A second ago, he wanted to say that if Marks McClown had a D, he would eat shit, but in the next second everything would be different. Marks I does not have a D, not even a single D, because all of them are S. 5 monarchs, 5 S's, and even Kenneth, who is regarded as a pronoun of picky, gave him S. This kind of achievement, even in a dream, Johannes never dreamed it, because even in a dream, it seemed so impossible. However, Marks McClown did it with an achievement that he didn't even dare to think of. He felt as if he had been slapped out of thin air. His entire face was hot. How? How is it possible? Johannes said as if he was waking up from a dream. In fact, many people reacted exactly like Johannes. 5 S's. They don't believe this grade on Marks I. Even if it was placed on Kenneth in the first grade, they didn't believe it either. Am I? There is an ear problem. How do I feel that I have a problem with my ears? Marks McClown, 5 S's. Some people in the stands were questioning their existence, and the other 2 who also took the exam were even more shocked. The black cloud overwhelmed the face that was still full of smiles the second after hearing this result. This is impossible. Number 2 strode forward. Her face completely lost the demeanor and humility of maintaining the image, almost distorted in anger. I suspect he is cheating. Number 2 barely said this by grabbing the collar of the lecturer. Are you suspecting that I can't even see the cheating of the candidates in the exam with my own eyelids? The lecturer glared at number 2. No. No. The second was stunned instantly, thinking that she was really impulsive. Stand back. The lecturer yelled at him. Wait. Teacher, did you make a mistake on the test paper? Number 2 suddenly raised her head, staring at the invigilator with both eyes. No. Even though the lecturer was shocked by Marks McClown's results, he was still not going to make such a low-level mistake of making mistakes in the test paper. Besides, there were only 3 people in total, and Marks McClown had already handed in the answer paper so early. He was not a fool. It may be wrong. The lecturer's dissatisfaction in his heart became heavier and heavier for this number 2, who had rushed up because of the unknown. It was uncomfortable to guess Marks McClown's strength originally. Stand back immediately and prepare for the next assessment, otherwise, don't blame me for cancelling your qualifications. Number 2 was so yelled, he didn't dare to make a fuss, but he still couldn't believe it. When he stood back, he kept staring at Mark's eye. The look in his eyes wanted to eat Mark's eye, as if he was sure he must be cheating. Same. Marks McClown was speechless. He just got an S. Is it so unbelievable? However, Marks McClown herself was also a little surprised, and Kenneth actually gave an S. He smiled silently. Marks McClown stopped paying attention to this. Seeing Marks McClown's mouth chuckle, the balance in her heart became increasingly unbalanced. The teacher must have made a mistake in the test paper. That S should be his own. Thinking of this, and seeing Marks McClown, an imposter who had replaced her with an excellent score, the hatred in No. 2's heart became more and more prosperous. This damn cloud night. No matter how excited or unbelievable everyone is, the assessment will continue. Seeking flowers. Go to the next assessment, the magic loop test. The lecturer shouted, and someone immediately stepped forward to prepare the tools. Up to this point, Neil Eddy in the stands hadn't slowed down. It's true that Mark's eye really got 5 S's. Second brother. Second brother. Don't worry, the next one is a magic circuit, and Mark's eye doesn't have it. Amos Comfort became thinner. He also said just now that it is impossible for Mark's eye without a magic circuit to pass the academic test. This is not just what Amos felt, but everyone who came to see the assessment thought so. But Marks McClown didn't explain anything. A 5's test paper was enough to prove too many things. Then, with this magic loop, will Mark's eye fail the audit as they thought or just give up the audit? Neil Eddy stared at Mark's eye in the field blankly. Marks McClown looked so calm, without the slightest worry on her face. This is real? Or did he pretend it? Neil didn't know. He was still full of anger just now, but now he was full of panic. Even the voice of Amos in his ear seemed to be imaginary and could not be heard at all. After the things on the field were ready, the only number 2 came on stage first. Even though he was shocked by Mark's eye's performance just now, he still looked gentle when he came on stage. Only he himself knew how hard he had taken to suppress the monstrous anger and hatred in his heart. The way to test the magic loop is somewhat different. After number 2 got up, he stood in the center of the test bench and closed his eyes. Then dozens of gems flew out of the teacher's hand, and they kept turning around No. 2's body. The number of gems flying out is the number of magic circuits on the second. Chapter 1266 A Perverted Genius. This article is updated by Vomiting Blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _. The speed at which the gemstones rotate can reflect the complexity of the tester's magic circuit to a certain extent. Just like now, every time the tester calls a magic circuit, a gem will fly out of the teacher's hand until all the magic paths of the tester are mobilized. This test method does not expose the specific conditions of the subject's magic circuit, but it can objectively judge the tester's degree of excellence. Whether to pass the review depends entirely on the judgment of the test teacher. Because the form of expression is too obvious, it is impossible to talk about shielding. After all, so many eyes are watching. A total of 37 magic circuits were mobilized on the second, which is considered relatively good. Passed. The audit teacher raised the 317 arm and shouted, indicating that the audit passed. Number 2 smiled humbly again, bowed and went down. On number 3, there are only 14 items, and the judgment of the review teacher is judged as a failure. When Marks McClown played, there was no exclamation around unexpectedly. Everyone looked at Marks McClown nervously, especially Weber. Kenneth had a relaxed look, because he was the only one who had personally confirmed that Mark-Sai had no magic loop. Although he was taken aback by Marks McClown's answer sheet, he knew very well that Marks McClown's genius could only stop there. Marks McClown seemed to know what Kenneth was thinking, suddenly looked up at him and smiled. Kenneth suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. This hunch made him extremely uneasy. Marks McClown stepped onto the stage step by step, closing his eyes. When the first gem flew up, Kenneth stood up suddenly. What? This is impossible. The moon spirit liquid flew out of his chest pocket and turned directly into a disc. Kenneth jumped up and flew to Marks McClown's side in an instant. When he arrived, there were already 5 or 6 gems spinning around Marks McClown. Kenneth's behavior stunned everyone watching. Director Kenneth? Why is he so excited? Don't you know? It was Director Kenneth who personally said before that Mark-Sai has no magic circuit. Then now, you don't mean to tell me that this guy has only been in school for 2 months, so just work out a magic circuit. Can the magic loop be researched by myself? It's always Director Kenneth who made a wrong judgment, right? It's not like. You can see the expression on Director Kenneth. That's right, there are only 4 big characters on Kenneth's face right now. Incredible. He didn't make any move to interrupt Marks McClown's test, but stood on the side, his heart full of anger and doubts about to overflow. How did he do that? One after another gems flew out of the hands of the reviewing teacher. Weber's eyes widened, and his heart was full of joy and shock. What the boss said is true. He really researched his own magic circuit. Genius. Absolute genius. If Weber weren't still watching the test, he would have liked to go back and print 10,000 posters to tell the people in the clock tower how genius his boss is. It is estimated that in the history of the clock tower for thousands of years, there is no genius who can study his own magic circuit within 2 months. The boss of Marks McClown, Weber, decided to stay with him forever. For others, Weber may not be so happy. Neil Eddy's whole face was ashes in place, and Amos' face turned pale with fright. Lost? They lost. Thinking of the bet he had made with Weber, Neil Eddy wished to stab him personally now. This Cloud Knight. How is this possible? Neil Eddy whispered. Judging by the number of magic circuits that Marks McClown is now mobilizing, he has undoubtedly passed the review. But the gem is still flying towards Marks McClown. You must know that magic loops cannot be added by research. Many magicians only have so many in their lifetime. But Mark-Sai already had more than 80 gems beside him at this time. At last, Mark-Sai stopped mobilizing the remaining magic circuits and fixed this number at 83. Mark-Sai has 164 real magic circuits, but this number is too eye-catching in the clock tower. After all, Kenneth has only 82. But even though Marks McClown thinks so, the current 83 items are enough to make him stand out. At least with this review, he has left an extremely deep impression on the hearts of the 5 monarchs, especially Kenneth. He didn't react until Mark-Sai's assessment was over. On the one hand, he couldn't believe the level of Marks McClown's genius, and on the other hand, he couldn't believe that there was such a genius in this world. More importantly, he suddenly understood that this kind of Mark-Sai, even if he fights with him the way he wants, can Kenneth win? It seems that it is far from enough. The magic circuit, the Sleeville knowledge that surprised him, and the perfect magic power. Only a first-year student? Kenneth didn't know what he was going to use to win such a Mark-Sai. After a moment of stunned, he didn't wait for the end of the assessment and left the field alone. Director Kenneth is gone. 4.7. It seems that my face is very bad. Is this Mark-Sai really just a first grade? It's against the sky. This magic circuit. A genius of abnormal level. In the 3 examinations, Marks McClown shocked everyone present 3 times, and even Kenneth left early. Although there is still the last test of combat ability. Who doesn't know Marks McClown's combat effectiveness? This last test does not even need to be seen. Chapter 1267, Ins Bellons show. This article is updated by middle. Vomiting blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ But although everyone knows the result, the assessment still has to continue. Plus, The last assessment requires a quarter of an hour in the hands of the assessment lecturer. Number 2 spent a lot of effort and finally passed all the examinations successfully, but number 3 was not so lucky, and could not even last for a stick of incense. However, Marks McClown didn't mean to be merciful at all. In just 3 rounds, he threw the audit teacher out of the prescribed battle circle. Therefore, Marks McClown passed the assessment without any accident. Even more because of this assessment, Marks McClown has become the only peerless genius in the history of the clock tower. After Weber was excited about Mark's eye up and down, he took the money even more excitedly, 50 times. Most of the money of those who bet on the side where the Mark's eye audit failed was basically in Weber's hands. When I went there, the casino owner almost gave Weber a bear hug, and he almost died. And Neil Eddy lost to Weber because of a bet and was forced to run around the clock tower streaking twice. These 12 things were also spread quickly. For a time the entire clock tower was completely lively. And the name Marks McClown is really true. Everyone knows it. At the same time, it was the name Mark's eye peerless genius who spread along with this name. It can be said that Mark's eye has become synonymous with genius. It is not an exaggeration. It can even be said that in the entire Magic Association for hundreds of years, there has been no genius of Mark's eye's level. In fact, if based on Marks McClown's true strength, it can be said that in the entire Magic Association's more than 2,000 years of history, there is no genius who can be compared with Marks McClown at this time. However, even part of Marks McClown's strength is already enough to shock the entire Magic Association. As for this kind of genius, he must win over his family, which is almost a rare consensus among the 12 monarchs. Perhaps the most entangled thing is Kenneth. As the patriarch of the Arkatpool family, why doesn't he want to have a genius in his family? But this genius is named Mark's eye. Still thinking about that person? The girl with short rosy hair bent over and leaned on the sofa, looking at Kenneth who frowned in front of her. Sora, why are you here? Kenneth turned his head and glanced, then pulled his fiancée over and sat next to him. Come and see you, genius classmate. The woman tilted her head and said with one foot on Kenneth's knee. This woman is Kenneth's fiancée, the daughter of the Minister of the Clock Tower Spirit Division Solar Nasal Safili. HMPH. Are you talking about me or Mark's eye? Kenneth looked displeased, but didn't take her foot down, but pulled her leg. Whether it's for you or the Akatpollards family, Mark's eye must be ours. Kenneth, the Fourth Holy Grail War is coming soon, but those children in the Akatpollards family, who do you think can pull it out and compare it to Mark's eye? Sora didn't think Kenneth's thought had passed the magic engraving to those people. Okay, I know. Kenneth sighed helplessly, looked at his fiancée, and nodded. He can always compromise what Solar said. Almost at the same time, Marks McClown has received letters from many big families. Boss, this is too exaggerated, right? Webb looked at the pile of exquisite envelopes in his hand. Unbelievable. There is even a letter of condolences from the Inspan family. Boss, you are really hot. Weber drew out a silver grey envelope with a gold writ seal on it that showed the origin of this letter. Inspan. Marks McClown didn't need to think about it, he knew what the Inspan family had sent the letter for. As one of the 3 founding royal families, Insbjorn is one of the few monster families that has no separate family and does not interact with other magicians, and can maintain a history of more than 1,000 years. But found that it is impossible to obtain the Holy Grail on its own. How long did it take to admit it? Although the people of the Inspan family felt very humiliated about the use of external forces, as far as Mark's eye knew, in the Fourth Holy Grail War, did they still seek help from Mimir Kasu? Now this letter should also want to pass the olive branch, but does not want to express his intentions so clearly. Condolence letters? It is estimated that only Inspan knows what he is condoning. I'm out for a walk. Marks McClown got up and went out. He didn't read any of these letters, lest someone came to him. He still went out to hide first. Here, Marks McClown just walked out of the door of the dormitory building, and on the hillside a few hundred meters away, a cold sight was aimed at him. Marks McClown frowned, but did not immediately turn to look at 283, but changed her direction and walked towards the hillside. Not only did he perceive the cold gaze, but also the black muzzle pointed at him. "Who is it? You want to kill me so soon?" Several names flashed in Marks McClown's mind, but they were all uncertain. At this time, the black-haired man hiding behind a big tree was stunned. A young country-up sniper rifle was in front of him, and the scope was aimed at Marks' temple. But when Marks McClown turned around and walked towards her, the index finger placed on the wrench returned. "He found me?" "No, it's impossible." The black-haired man quickly overturned his guess. The distance between the two was almost 700 meters. Unless they were of the level of Jewel Wing, there should be no magician who could find his position so quickly. At this moment, the target person, Mark's eye, stopped under a tree, bent over and picked up a leaf. Chapter 1268, Magician Killer Iyomiya Kireji. This article is updated by Vomiting Blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ It's now. Pull the trigger. A sniper rifle with a silencer would not make much noise, and he would not even know whose hand he died. Mission completed. Seeing that the people under the tree were bent down before they could straighten up, they fell on the spot. The black-haired man let out a breath, and he was about to get up the next second, but his eyes widened. In the scope, Mark's eye, who was supposed to have fallen to the ground, stood up suddenly and looked at the camera accurately. Those eyes clearly knew he was here. Impossible. He actually missed the shot. After a brief period of panic, the black-haired man immediately adjusted his sight and pulled the trigger. Another shot. Call out. Marks McClown raised her eyebrows. Come back. No matter how fast the bullet is, in Marks McClown's eyes, it is just the speed of a tennis ball. If Marks McClown was willing, it would be okay to race against pistol bullets. In this case, how could a mere bullet hurt Mark's eye? So the black-haired man who fired the shot again was surprised to find that the target he was shooting disappeared. "Who are you?" a cold voice sounded above his head. For those who want their own lives, Marks McClown has always had no good feelings. The black-haired man got up almost instantly. Intrinsic time control, double speed. Marks McClown was stunned for a moment. This magic. Is this person Kirisu Iyomiya? He confirmed in the next moment. Because the other party did not hesitate to take out an old-fashioned pistol. What could it be instead of the original bullet? Why did Iyomiya Kirisu kill him? Marks McClown didn't have time to think, because Wigong Kirishi's attacks followed one after another. With the fierce gunfire, countless bullets flew toward Marks McClown with eyes. Kirisu Iyomiya had a short sword submachine gun in his left hand and a pistol loaded with original bullets in his right hand, and at the same time, he shot at high speed while retreating quickly. How diaresis? Kiritsuga's eyes flashed in shock again. That person disappeared again. I advise you not to waste bullets. Marks McClown appeared instantly, raised his hand with a hand knife and slashed it on Wigong Kiss's left hand, and the submachine gun fell. Marks McClown stretched out his hand to catch it, holding it back with his backhand, and moving towards Iyomiya Kirisu was a bullet rain 3 times faster. Iyomiya Kirito instantly turned on the acceleration of the inherent time control, which could be able to dodge the bullet coming at a high speed, but the 3 times the acceleration on the body is also extremely powerful. If he is allowed to gain the upper hand again, he will be in danger. But Iyomiya Kirisu didn't understand one thing. It took a lot of effort to avoid these bullets. This person looked effortless. Is it pretending? Or is it true? But now is not the time to think about these issues. Kirisu Iyomiya is used to thinking about the worst, assuming that the opponent is unmatched in speed. The only way to win is close combat. In the next second, he rushed towards Mark's eye. His right hand was the prepared origin bomb. Marks McClown knew what he was going to do. At this time, he basically understood why Iyomiya Kirisu wanted to kill himself. Obviously someone bought the murderer, but no matter why, he always did it on himself. So in that case, don't blame him for being rude. But it's just one's own way to cure the other's body. Anyway, he doesn't mind losing one competitor in the 4th Holy Grail War. If Kirito Iyomiya is dead now, he can find a way to accept the holy relic used to summon Saber. The submachine gun in Mark's Eye's hand is shooting again. Intrinsic time control. Triple speed. It is 3 times faster. After dodge a series of bullets again, Emiya Kiriji's face was already very ugly, but at this time he had already rushed in front of Mark's Eye. Want to fight melee? What a trick. Marks McClown sneered and threw away the submachine gun in his hand. Seeing him advancing instead of retreating, Emiya Kirisi raised the pistol in his hand the second he noticed something was wrong. Origin Bomb. The ceremonial outfit of Kirito Uemomi is fatal to the magician who has a complicated magic circuit. Especially according to him, Mark's Eye, who was tested the magic circuit not long ago, obviously has a large number of excellent magic circuits. But Emiya Kirisu didn't know that Mark's Eye was not afraid of the Origin Bomb at all. Regardless of his magic circuit is not real, but a mimic magic circuit created by his own simulation of Kenneth's magic circuit. Even if it is a real magic circuit, the original bomb will not cause any harm to him. The main reason why Emiya Kirito could use the original bullet to make Kenneth almost turned into a useless man was because Kenneth was angered by Kirito Emiya and called too many magic circuits before he was defeated by one move. In other words, how much effect the Origin Bomb can play depends on how many magic circuits the attacker calls. And the current Mark's Eye is basically relying on the army to fight. Such a powerful and even terrifying body could not be considered by Kirisu Uemomi. So, he lost without a doubt. Before the Origin bullet even came out, Waigonk Kaiwankionhao was caught by Marks McClown's left hand, and he slammed over the shoulder quickly without time to react. Boom. Emiya Kiriji, who couldn't hold it because of the excessive use of high-power acceleration, would directly be thrown to cough up blood. At the moment you set out to kill me, you should be ready to die. Marks McClown held the pistol with the Origin bullet in his hand, and then slowly put the muzzle of the gun to the center of the eyebrows of Waigonk Kisi. Even if Emiya Kirisu watched that he was dying, there was still not much panic in his eyes. The most powerful mage of Harry Potter Chapter 1269. He is too strong. Please subscribe automatically. This article is updated by middle. Vomiting blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ Marks McClown looked at him coldly, and when his eyes touched Waigonk Kisi's dark eyes, he sneered in his heart. Now that he still feels that he will not kill him. Don't you want to know who is going to kill you? Waigonk Kisi said, even though there was no expression on his face. Marks McClown did not let the panic flashing in his eyes finally understand your situation. Unfortunately, although Marks McClown wanted to know who made the move, he didn't bother to know from a killer. Just by looking at the reaction of the person in front of him, Emiya Kirito knew that he would not let him go because of someone behind the scenes. He couldn't see through this person, whether it is strength or mind. They are far above him. The danger level of this Mark's Eye is simply the best he has ever seen. Waigonk Kisi fell silent. Marks McClown smiled coldly, and said, then, goodbye. As soon as the voice fell, Marks McClown's right index finger just landed on the trigger of the revolver. Under him, Emiya Kirisu shouted, wait. You let me go, I will help you win the 300th Holy Grail War. Hearing this, Marks McClown raised his eyebrows, and the shooting stopped. Even if he was a few tenths of a second late, the bullet would go out of the chamber. At this moment, even Emiya Kirisu was shocked in cold sweat. Marks McClown, the person who even controls time, is so accurate that it makes people feel sincerely terrified. Marks McClown slowly got up, and the revolver was put away by him. After looking at Waigonk Kisi, Marks McClown said, go on. Emiya Kirisu knew that the current chance of him escaping from this man was less than 1 in 10,000. I have learned before that you let the civilians send people to find the holy relics, so there is no doubt that the purpose of looking for the holy relics is to participate in this Holy Grail War. After that, Emiya Kirisu sat up and pulled off the black glove on his left hand, revealing the scarlet repelling curse pattern on the back of his hand. Has he been selected to fight? Marks McClown frowned. This time was not in his control, but it was about this time so he had to speed up the progress. I have been selected to become the master, and there has been news from the Inspan family that the holy relic has been confirmed. If you agree, we can sign a self-enforcing certificate. The content of the oath is that Yomi Akirigi and the summoned servants will form an alliance with Mark-Sai, and the course of action during the alliance is based on you. The contract lasts until the end of the Fourth Holy Grail War. What do you think? C put on his gloves again and said slowly, self-compulsory evidence, in the world of magicians, is a spell contract used when concluding things that can never be breached. According to the principle, the curse of the contract cannot be lifted by any means. Even if you sacrifice your life, as long as the magic engraving is still even the soul after death will be bound. Marx McClown whispered, then looked at Wygong Kissy, coldly said, the contract condition is that I will spare your life. McClown's Wygong Kirisu nodded. Oh, your employer really found a qualified assassin. If you don't conclude the contract, you will die now. Even if you escape, you won't be able to win me in the Holy Grail War. So just form an alliance with me. Good thought, Marx McClown said coldly, but she was thinking about another thing in her heart. Emiya Keiji summoned Saba with the holy relic provided by the Inspan family. If the holy relic is correct, then his Saba should be King Arthur. Although in Mark-Sai's memory, the Saba Biff in the Fourth Holy Grail War was not very conspicuous in the battle, it can be said that it is hard to fight anyone, but in terms of parameters, it is not entirely undesirable. No. It can even be said that only from the perspective of the parameters, the Saba of the Fourth Holy Grail War is almost the best level in history, and even surpasses the future when Rintoku is the master. King Arthur. Marx McClown paused, and said, all right, let's form an alliance, but before that, tell me who your employer is. After Yomi Akirigi got up, he began to prepare a self-compulsory certificate. Regarding Mark-Sai's question, he could say that he did not hesitate. The employer did not come in person. It was a man codenamed Dex. He only said that he got my news from someone else. He gave the target information and rewards and left. One day later, I will go to a church in a suburb outside London. Report the results. Marx McClown just nodded when he heard it. He believed half of Wygong's words, and he didn't believe half of it. After preparing the contract, Marx McClown took a look at it. The object of the binding warlock Yomi Akiriza. If the following conditions are established as a prerequisite, the oath is like a precept, binding the object without exception. Oath content. During the Fourth Holy Grail War, Yomi Akagi and his followers formed an alliance with Mark-Sai and his followers. The alliance was based on Mark-Sai as the messenger, and Mark-Sai had the greatest right to speak in the alliance until the exception was the alliance. All the remaining enemies died or retreated. Oath time. From this moment to the end of the Fourth Holy Grail War. The terms of the oath were merely to ask Mark-Sai to release the guardian Gong Kiai heir to a living. This contract only restricts Wygong Kissy instead of Marx McClown, and it does no harm to Marx McClown. But if Emiya Kiritsugu wanted to do anything with this contract, he would let him know the consequences. McClowns, you can go. I will find out your employer. Marx McClown waved his hand, and threw the contract that had already fulfilled the conditions back into the hands of Wygong Kissy. When the people left, Marx McClown also went back to the clock tower directly. Even though he knew that tomorrow he could follow Wygong Kissy and follow the path to find the person who wanted to kill him, but Marx McClown had no interest in this person right now. He has just arrived at the clock tower for more than 2 months, and the people he provoke are only those students from the nobles. After a little elimination, you will know who the suspects are. Chapter 1270, Summoning Servants in Advance. This article is updated by middle. Vomiting blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ Now that he knew the suspect, why bother to find the one who actually paid the bill? Then shouting for ironclad evidence, then go to find the Black Hand behind the scenes to settle accounts? Mark-Sai does not need evidence. This is the confidence to have absolute strength as a backing. Without any evidence, Just think, whoever it is. Even if you kill 1,000 by mistake, you will always kill the right one. In this world, apart from Weber, no one can be regarded as friends with Mark-Sai, but even Weber doesn't know it. Mark-Sai looks ordinary but somewhat cold, and in his bones there will be such arrogance. This is not due to character, but his strength, which gives him the power to do so. No matter what world it is, this is the same 08-7 truth. If in the clock tower, Jewel Wang caught a few people who spoke harshly to him, then no one would have any opinion, let alone a complaint, just because Jewel Wang is the marshal of the Demon Dan, the second magician. But if this person was replaced by Mark-Sai, hundreds of people would come out to accuse him, and even some of them would hire a killer to take his life. Marx McClown has always had no sympathy for this kind of thing and this kind of person. It's just that at the moment, he doesn't want to expose himself so quickly. They can find a killer like Kiyomiya Kairisu, so why can't Mark-Sai find a fighter of her own? It seems it's time for heroic spirit summoning to be on the agenda. In a church outside of London, Kairi Ayu arrived as scheduled. He was dressed in black, carrying a black suitcase, and walked calmly into a confession booth. How? An urgent voice sounded in the darkness. Mission failed. This is a refund, Yumiya Kiritaga said blankly, putting the black suitcase in his hand on the chair. What did you say? The people in the dark shouted in surprise, and seemed to hit the pavilion. How can you fail? Haven't you successfully killed many powerful magicians before? That person is very strong, so for this task, you still have to ask for a high-powered person. Imiyakiritaga said lightly, then I will go first. There was no answer in the darkness, and Kairisu Yomiya turned and left. Too strong. Only a male voice whispered in the darkness. On the other side, Mark-Sai had already contacted Yu Yifei. He intends to summon followers in advance against the rules. In the Holy Grail War, the normal summoning process is to wait for the magic of the Holy Grail to gather. After the magic of the Holy Grail is enough to summon 7 servants, the 7 masters selected will be given the spell. The so-called enchantment is actually the crystallization of magic power floating on the surface of the magician's body, and it will be combined with the magic circuit in the magician's body, which is equivalent to a part of the nerve. When the selected masters begin to summon at normal times, part of the huge magic power needed to summon the heroic spirits will be provided by the spirit veins. The biggest disadvantage of the early default call is that Mark-Sai needs to bear all the magic power needed to call the hero. If the summoner's own magic power is not enough, then it is very likely to be drained of all magic power during the summoning and cause death. Therefore, few people will actively try to call for breach of contract. But all these constraints pose no threat to Marx McClown, because in terms of the amount of magic in the body, Marx McClown can almost despise anyone in this world, so even without the magic support provided by this spirit vein, Marx McClown can complete the summoning. The last is the job introduction for summoning heroes. For Mark-Sai, his first consideration is the job placement of caster. The reason is actually very simple. First of all, Mark-Sai remembers the caster and his master Inosuke in the original 4th Holy Grail War. The purpose of the two people was not to compete for the Holy Grail, and they did not have the consciousness of being a magician, and even engaged in it. A farce. Therefore, Marx McClown didn't feel any harm in replacing this caster and his master. These two people are simply useless shit sticks. And the magician who can be born as a caster, in the study of magic, must be closer to real magic than the study of the world. This is the most suitable teacher for Marx McClown, who has just arrived in this world and is in desperate need to understand the rules of magic and all kinds of things about magic. After all, how can modern magicians be as powerful as God's magicians? Although the job agency of caster is not suitable for the hard battle of swords and swords, Mark-Sai can play as a heroic spirit like a berserker by virtue of her own abilities. Then your partner, if it is a caster that can help enhance your own, is a relatively better choice. Therefore, if you can come to a heroic magician to assist you in fighting, then the Holy Grail will be within reach. And in this way, his group is equivalent to 2 heroic people fighting. In addition, Imiyakiritagu. Although he knew that this person was deep-minded, he might not be unavailable. When Marks McClown was about to think about it, Yu Yifei also came to the appointment. Sorry, I'm late. Yu Yifei smiled apologetically. Marks McClown nodded and said, sit down. Yu Yifei sat down, took a sip of 0.6 tea, and said, I guess Brother Marks I is here today for the Holy Relic. Are you planning to participate in the Holy Grail War? Marks McClown raised his eyes and glanced at him, and said faintly, don't ask so many things that you shouldn't know, just say that your people have found the Holy Relic. Then I won't ask more. Yu Yifei nodded and said, as for the Holy Relics, a total of 5 pieces have been collected. 3 of the Holy Relics have almost no residual magic power. It is estimated that they cannot be summoned, or the level of the summoned heroes is not high. Chapter 1271 Heroes Summon. This article is updated by middle. Vomiting blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ and the other 2 sacred relics, one of which is an ancient helmet. According to analysis, Yu should be a figure from the ancient Roman era. They are old but cannot be traced to specific characters. The remaining sacred relic was found, the one with the highest remaining magic power in the Holy Relic. But when talking about this, Yu Yifei visibly frowned. It seemed that some metaphors were hard to say, or he dared not say it. What is it? Marks McClown asked. That's a shackle. Thinking of the huge black fetters, Yu Yifei felt as if he had been crushed by a boulder and couldn't breathe. What kind of monster is it? After so many years of death, such a high magical power can be found in its relics? Marks McClown became interested in this, and said, oh, take me to see. Yu Yifei nodded, and the 2 walked to the place where the Holy Relic was temporarily placed. The shackles and sheet 14 were placed in a room alone, and a huge wooden box could be seen in the room as soon as he entered the door. Sure enough, as Yu Yifei said, as soon as he approached, Marks I noticed the magic fluctuations coming from the box. Go open, Yu Yifei said to the 2 people behind him. The moment the box was opened, Marks McClown clearly found that whether it was the 2 people who opened the box or Yu Yifei, their faces without exception turned pale for an instant. Marks McClown took a step forward, and suddenly he was stunned. Lying on a box of dry weeds was an unusually large fetter. How big is it? Marks McClown stared at the iron ring, thinking that if Yu Yifei was thinner, he could get out of it. The fetters have obviously gone through thousands of years, but whether it is the hard iron ring or the solid iron ball the size of a football attached to the chain, there is not even a trace of rust on it. It's almost as if people or monsters have been locked inside for so many years, dragging a heavy iron ball to keep moving. Coupled with the bloodthirsty breath of the fetters themselves, it is no wonder that these 3 people have such ugly faces. Such a big fetter. I don't know what kind of monster that was locked by it countless years ago. Marks McClown's eyes sank slightly, staring at the black shackles for a long time before turning around and going out. Marks McClown was taken by Yu Yifei to take a look at several other holy relics, and as Yu Yifei said, there were few that could be used. Moreover, Marks McClown still cares more about the strength of the heroes. The greater the magic power left on this holy relic, the more magic power is consumed when summoning heroes, and the strength of the heroes summoned is naturally stronger. After hesitating for a while, Marks McClown decided to use the shackles. He didn't know where he belonged, even though it wasn't a lock in the eyes. In the face of a monster who could use such horrible shackles, more magicians would choose to stay away. After all, if the summoned monster is mentally insufficient or bloodthirsty, even if the master has 3 spells, it will be difficult to control. Even though Marks McClown was worried about this, compared to the loyalty of the heroic spirits, strength was still more important in this hardly moral Holy Grail war. Taking away the shackles, Marks McClown clearly felt that Yu Yifei and the others were relieved. It seemed that the deterrent power of this thing was indeed quite extraordinary. Since Iomiya Kirisu has obtained the stigmata, it means that the Holy Grail War will begin soon. Then we must hurry up and prepare for the call of servants. In fact, Marks McClown is no better than other masters. He doesn't need to prepare anything. Now the holy relic is already ready for Marks McClown. He only needs to find a time when he is not disturbed. It was night. Shortly after the 12 o'clock in the morning, Marks McClown climbed on the roof of the teaching building alone, raised his head with his right hand, and dragged a huge box with one hand. He had already arranged enchantments around the rooftops. Except for Da Yuan's magic power, everything else would be isolated and blocked, and even a trace of mental power would not enter, let alone ordinary sight. Go to the center of the rooftop. The spiritual power was quickly released, covering the entire enchantment. After confirming that there was nothing unusual, Marks McClown began to arrange the magic circle. The huge magic circle, about 2 meters in diameter, slowly took shape. When the last stroke fell, the lines that formed the magic circle lit up one by one, and finally, the dazzling white light almost illuminated the entire rooftop. After the light slowly calmed down, the lines of the entire magic circle flowed slowly like a milky white liquid, around each line, forming a full circle of magic circle. Marks McClown stood beside the magic circle, nodded, and then walked into the center of the magic circle with a black box. After standing still, Marks McClown slowly closed his eyes, and said, "Mannying, Mannying, 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 Mannying." The cycle is repeated, followed by 5, however, when full is a waste opportunity. As Marks I sang in a low voice, the milky white liquid on the magic circle began to beat a little bit, beating 387, until it boiled. These pure magic crystals are making the final savings, waiting for the moment of explosion. Declare, "Your body is placed under me, and my life is given to you." Sword, at the call of the Holy Grail. If you are willing to follow this intention and proceed from this point of view, answer it. Swear here. "I am the one who accomplishes all the good in the world. I am the one who conveys all the evil in the world. You are the 7 days of the 3 great words. Come through the wheel of restraint, guardian of the balance." As soon as the voice fell, the boiling liquid seemed to evaporate in an instant, and the wave-like magical power followed the guidance to bloom more and more bright light. Marks McClown was instantly swallowed by the white light. The magical formation like a little sun lasted for more than 50 seconds before the dazzling light that enveloped the entire sky finally dissipated. Harry Potter, the Most Powerful Mage, Chapter 1272. The Most Perfect and Most Powerful Master. This article is updated by middle. Vomiting blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ and the magic circle under Marks McClown's feet gradually became the original appearance. Plus, opening his eyes, Marks I found himself shrouded in a huge shadow. Slowly raising his head, surrounded by Marks I, he couldn't help but startled at this time. At this time, less than 1 meter in front of him, stood a huge person. Or a cow. This man has a bull-headed human body, and the huge bull-head mask is unobtrusive on his nearly 3-meter high body, as if he was born this long. And under the bull's head mask is a sturdy body that is a little frightening. On his back is 2 giant axes that are higher than his own. Both feet are buckled with heavy iron rings, and there is also one attached to the iron ring on his left foot. A solid iron ball full of 100 catties. Marks McClown had no doubt that all the explosive power of the guy who could be called a monster in front of him was enough to easily destroy a house. At the same time, a vague shadow suddenly flashed in Marks McClown's mind. Bullhead human body. And the huge shackles all over the body? Asterius. Marks McClown cried suspiciously. He was not sure whether the man with a bullhead mask over 3 meters tall was the monster in his memory that was circulated in ancient Greek mythology. And after the servant of the bullhead was summoned out, he was also observing his master Marks I. But after hearing Marks McClown call his name, the huge body of the bullhead masked man trembled slightly. How long has no one called him by this name? With just one name, Asterius, who has the name of Thunderlight, put down his guard against Marks I. Well, yes, I am. Although Asterius stumbled a bit, he still tried to make every word clear. "You are me. My master?" Marks McClown nodded and confirmed the identity of the guy in front of him. Legend has it that after Minos drove Rhadamanthys to become the king of Crete, Poseidon gave Minos a huge white bull and asked him to sacrifice it to himself. But Minos stiffly replaced the sacrifice with another bull, so Minos' wife, Pasiphae, was cursed by Poseidon and mated with a bull to give birth to a bull-headed monster Minotaur. Theseus, the son of the king of Athens, was killed with the help of Ariadne. Mark's Eye only remembers so much about Astraeus' illusions. In his opinion, whether the story is true or false, Astraeus in front of him is a tragic figure, especially after seeing the thick scars on his bare skin all over his body, which were formed by countless old injuries and new injuries. Marks McClown's eyes moved again. A natural monster. Then, hello, I am Mark's Eye. Mark's Eye recovered, took a step back, and stretched out his hand. Astraeus didn't seem to react. He looked down at Marks McClown in a daze, and then at Marks McClown's outstretched hand. After a while, he stretched out his right hand and said, I am Astraeus. Marks McClown said directly for him. He almost forgot that this guy's communication skills should not be very strong. Astraeus nodded twice. Marks McClown stretched out his left hand and patted his hand. Astraeus was obviously not the magician he wanted. As a natural beast, he was undoubtedly the berserker in this Holy Grail war. There was a tingling pain in his left arm. Marks McClown looked down, and a bleeding red link curse appeared on the back of his hand. This link curse would merge with the magician's own magic circuit, and Marks McClown's was not a real magic circuit. But now the link curse was already in his hands, but it appeared at a different time. Or, is the Holy Grail found that there is a problem with his magic circuit? But now Marks McClown didn't want to entangle this problem. He directly used the power of the Master to see the various aspects of Astraeus' ability value. If Marks McClown had thought that it would be great if he could summon a magician, then it can be said that Marks McClown was completely shocked by Astraeus' ability value. Muscle strength, A++. Durability, A++. Agility, A. Magic, B. Even the treasures are X level. If there were other masters present at this time, and seeing a berserker with such a power value, it would be frightened to speak. This level of berserker can be said to be the top level comparable to the legendary hero Hercules. As for Astraeus, this level can show almost all his strength in his lifetime. In Mark's Eye's cognition, Astraeus' ability is not very weak, but he did not expect that after the Master changed to himself, he could still have such a big improvement. It can be said that the current Astraeus, compared with all the berserkers that have appeared in the past, can also be called a superclass follower. Even the only magic power that Astraeus lacks can be supplemented by Mark's Eye. The ability to do this depends on Mark's Eye's own magical power being so huge that it is terrifying. If he is replaced by another magician, such a powerful servant may be sucked out of magical power and die when he is summoned. Taking a step back, even if the summoning is successful, the magical power of ordinary people can't support Astraeus with such strength. What's more fundamentally, if a magician with low ability summons Astraeus, the various parameters of Astraeus will be dragged down by the Master's aptitude, which will cause a sharp decline. We must know that the better the magician, the closer the parameters of the heroic spirits summoned will be to the strength of his life. If you are unlucky, you will encounter a half-hanging magician like Shiro Wijaya in the 5th Holy Grail War. Excellent parameters will also be completely worn down. Chapter 11273, Raising a Giant Pet. This article is updated by middle. Vomiting blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ Astraeus full picture. The Mavericks are cute. It's the only card face SMDRR that doesn't need to be hung up. It's not easy. Saber Altrio is the best example. The parameters when Rin Tasaka and Kirita Uguyomiyo are the masters are very close to the heyday of Saber. However, when the master is changed to Shiro Ear, the parameters are straight down to the second-rate level. And in Mark's Eye's vague memory, when Astraeus originally took Fujimaru Tetsuka as the master in the future, his parameters were already very high. which shows that his heyday will be even more terrifying. After all, although the Chaldean followers did not provide for the demon by Fujimaru Tetsuka himself, it can be seen from the changes in the parameters of Saber that the degree of the Chaldeans provided by the demon can only be equivalent to the hero. It's just a master above the level. So only 097 is required for the master to become more perfect. Then Astrius' parameters will only be stronger than in the future period in Chaldea. Now it seems that he is on the two shortcomings of agility and magic, both directly promoted 2 levels. And all these changes are all because of Mark Sai. It can be said that Mark Sai is undoubtedly the strongest and most outstanding magician at the level of the master. Almost no one can match Mark Sai. Astrius naturally knew this. He knew the changes in his physical strength more clearly than Marx McClown. Everything seemed to be unimpeded, as if he was not the hero who was called from the seat of heroes and attached to the magician to provide magic power, but a true Astrius. And this resurrection, he felt that he could even use and consume magic power unscrupulously, and the source of his magic power was his master. From this it can be seen how powerful his master is. In addition, when they met, Marx McClown called out the Pfsi name he was given at the beginning, instead of the synonym of that cannibalism that has been sung by countless people in history, meaning King Minos Minotaur of the Bull. Therefore, it can be said that Astrius, who has just been summoned, does not have a trace of hostility or vigilance towards Mark Sai. Maybe even Mark Sai himself does not know that he has obtained it without doing anything. All the loyalty of this monster. Seeing Astrius' ability value, Marx McClown suddenly got a thought in his mind after being slightly happy. Astrius. Marx McClown raised his head and shouted, "McClowns!" Astrius squatted down on the spot, so that Marx McClown didn't have to look up at him. His action made Marx McClown raise his eyebrows, but he didn't think about it, but rather excitedly said, "Let's try somewhere to see if I can beat you." Astrius was taken aback, as if he didn't understand, and said, "Master, are you going to hit me?" "No." Marx McClown shook his head helplessly, and explained, "It's a discussion, understand?" Looking at Astrius with a dazed expression, Marx McClown was speechless for a while, and then said, "It's just that the two of us have a fight. We are not allowed to let the water go. See who can win, understand?" This time Astrius finally understood, but subconsciously he shook his head and said anxiously, "No, no. The master will be hurt." Marx McClown shook his head and said, "No, I will pay attention." Astrius still shook his head. Marx McClown was speechless for a moment, and then asked, "Can you fight or not?" Astrius still shook his head, squatting there like a little daughter-in-law who did something wrong. Marx McClown didn't know how such thoughts came up in his mind, but right now he really wanted to fight Astrius to see what his strength could be. However, Marx I was also very helpless in this way. After a while, Marx McClown pretended to be angry and asked, "Do you think I can't beat you?" Hearing this, Astrius shook his head immediately, but stopped after a few shooks, as if he did not dare to look at Marx I, then nodded. Marx McClown. Marx McClown suddenly felt like summoning a large pet. "If you don't agree anymore, I'll use Linkshu to order you." Marx McClown stretched out her left hand as she spoke. "Agree." Astrius just didn't speak very dexterously, and sometimes thought a little like a child, but his mind still turned fast. There are only 3 link curses in total, which can have the effect of turning things around when necessary. How can one waste such a trivial matter? Isn't it just a fight? He just tried not to let Marx McClown get injured. Marx McClown raised her eyebrows, put her hands away, and turned around and said, "Let's go then." At the beginning, Astrius had a bad feeling. It's because no matter how hard he uses, he can't catch up with Marx I. Originally, because of a powerful master like Marx I, Astrius's abilities in all aspects have been improved. Originally, speed and agility were absolute shortcomings, and now he can compare with Saber of the same level, compete. But now, Astrius found tragically that he couldn't even catch up with his master. Could it be that my feelings about my own strength are all illusions? Astralius quickly shook his head and forgot the terrible conjecture, speeding up to chase Mark-Si's figure again. The two rushed forward one after another, bypassing all the people on the way, until Mark-Si stopped on an uninhabited plain with mountains on three sides. And now it is 2 or 3 in the morning. It is the time when ordinary people sleep most well, no matter how troublesome they think. Someone found out. To ensure that there were no people, Mark-Si used his mental power to sweep the surrounding 2 kilometers after stopping, confirming that there were no outsiders except them. Chapter 1274 The Battle of God. Chapter. For automatic subscription, this article is updated by middle. Vomiting blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ Mark-Si stood still, and then said, "Okay, let's get started." Astrius didn't dare to be careless in his heart. He immediately switched to combat mode when he heard Marx McClown's words. His eyes were very different, his muscles were tight, and Buddha could see the vigorous power surging under the dark skin. The aura of the two of them was slowly accumulating, and then at the same moment, they broke out. Astrius' attack is simple and effective, and striding to meet Mark-Si is a heavy punch. The fist's head was made of cast iron, and the sound of tearing the air could be heard when it was thrown out. If you encounter an enemy like Astrius on the real battlefield, Mark-Si's countermeasure is definitely to win with speed, and it is important to preserve strength. But now this kind of purely competitive struggle, Marx McClown also let go of the fight. The same is a big punch. Marx McClown's movement made Astrius startled, but the fist that was thrown out was like water that was thrown out, and it couldn't be taken back. If someone else saw it, they would definitely be shocked just like Astrius. Right now one side is a behemoth nearly 3 meters tall, but one side is a slender magician. So, 2 people like this are actually competing for fists. In the next instant, the fists of the two crashed together. Boom! One of Astrius' fists was quite bigger than Marx McClown's head, but 2 fists of such a huge difference in size did not have the tendency of deteriorating and decayed as expected. Not on either side. The shock in Astrius' heart was bigger than the fist he threw, because he clearly felt that Marx McClown's strength was no less than his, and there was even a tendency to overtake him. Although this punch Astrius didn't use his full strength because he was worried about Mark-Si, a punch like the Berserker, who is known for his strength, should be unstoppable by Mark-Si anyway. Or it should be said that according to common sense, there is no modern magician who can confront the heroic spirits. Only the heroic spirits can fight against the heroic spirits, let alone fight against the heroic spirits. Of course, this theory, which was emphasized many times at the beginning of the Fifth Holy Grail War, was broken many times in the later period, but after all, there are still very few who can use the body of a mortal to compete with the heroic spirits. The eyes under the mask of Astrius were full of shock. He never thought that one day he would meet a human being as powerful as he was. Even if it is the hero Theseus who killed himself, it mainly depends on the skills that are different from his own beastly combat methods. Astrius already knows that Marx McClown is already very terrifying in terms of magic power. This can be seen from his own ability, and as a magician with huge magic power and talent, he also has the ability a force comparable to him. Astrius was not shocked because of this apparently improbable thing. What he was really shocked was only his admiration and shock for the powerful strength that Marx McClown had erupted. For Astrius, the magic power and the magician are the rules of the world, and they are not within his consideration. But fighting Mark-Si like this made him truly realize that the person in front of him is not just a master who summons a powerful servant in hopes of obtaining the Holy Grail, but a powerful and heroic person who can stand shoulder to shoulder with him, the king of combat. In addition to being surprised, what was more was the intent to fight that was ignited in Astrius' heart. This kind of pure warfare has nothing to do with any emotion, any hatred, any purpose. Come again, Astrius actively shouted. Marx McClown smiled sincerely. This may be the first time he has fought so happily since he came to this world. After feeling the clear but surging fighting spirit in Astrius' eyes like a gushing lake, Marx McClown also rarely excited. In this world, the battle with Gem Weng was depressing, bleak, and full of conspiracy. The fight with Kenneth was angry and disdainful. Middle dot middle dot middle dot middle dot middle dot middle dot ask for flowers middle dot 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 middle dot. As for the dot 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 fight with Weber, it was just for fun, and Marks McClown had to worry about not hurting him excessively. Only now, he can let go of his hands and feet without worrying about any consequences, and willfully use his best to fight. Come. As soon as Marks McClown's voice fell, the whole person flew out like a cannonball in an instant. Astrius stood in place, his legs steadily squeezed, and he roared in a low voice. Slowly, the eyes under his mask began to turn red, and the aura on Astrius suddenly rose to a level again at this moment. At this moment, Marks McClown had already come to him. The two slammed their fists together. Boom! Marks McClown immediately noticed the difference in Astrius. The power was not as majestic as before, but like a volcanic eruption. The power that erupted in an instant made Marks McClown a little unsupportable. A happily long figure flew upside down in the sky, while the hill-like figure on the ground stood still. Turning his head and landing, Marks McClown couldn't help but shake his numb arm, feeling slightly startled. So strong, is this the strength of Astrius after getting serious? Sure enough, every plus sign in A++ means that the power can be doubled in an instant. At the beginning, Astrius probably didn't use all his power, but only a fraction of it. In fact, even the initial speed, according to Mark's Eye's visual observation, is actually between the two of them. But Astrius may be good at explosive speed, so he felt that when moving long distances can't catch up with Mark's Eye. Chapter 1275 Gold Beta. Please read it automatically. This article is updated by middle dot vomiting blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ However, Marks McClown didn't show his timidity. He stared at Astrius, whose whole body was glowing with a faint red light. His fighting spirit in his eyes did not retreat but instead moved forward. Boom! The two collided in the air again. In the air within a radius of 2 kilometers, two different magical powers are tumbling. This battle, when really dark. Even though Astralius did not use his battle axe, Mark's Eye did not use any of his whole cards. But even so, between the two of them, the land under their feet is dead. This battle fought all night, until both of them were heartily and sweaty. Happy, Marks McClown said, leaning on Astrius' unusually wide back. McClown. Astrius nodded in agreement. The two of them sat back to back on a hillside protrusion, looking at the hillside that had been destroyed by them but was restored by Mark's Eye a minute ago. The breeze passed, and dawn was breaking in the distance. Astrius looked at this scene and couldn't help but wonder. Marks McClown raised her eyebrows. No matter which world she was in, it was a wonderful thing to find a secluded corner to watch the sunrise and sunset. And after a night of discussions, Marks McClown probably converted his own strength according to the world's concept of heroic spirits. As a hero, Mark's Eye's ability level should be almost like this: muscle strength, A. Durability, A. Agility, A. Magic, X. In this way, if Marks McClown is really a hero, it can be counted as a super first-class level. After thinking about it, Marks McClown was consciously satisfied, and thought of a small purpose that he had summoned in advance in violation of the rules. Astrius, I have something to do. I can't do it myself, Marks McClown said. The master arranged 10,000. 10,000 deaths. Astrios reacted immediately, staring at Marks McClown with a serious look. That's not necessary, come with me. Marks McClown stood up and said with a helpless smile. The two went back to the clock tower one after another. On the way, Mark's Eye had already told Astrius what had happened. Hearing that someone was about to kill his master, Astrius was already very angry, saying that he must complete the task. Send Astrius to the vicinity of the suspects' families in the clock tower, and Marks McClown will hide first by herself. Plus, Marks McClown himself did not intend to reveal himself, and no one knew that Marks McClown had summoned the servants except himself, so even if Astralius lifted the entire clock tower, no one would contact him. Go ahead. Nodded towards Astrius. Marks McClown quietly hid his breath and hid away. Astrius nodded, unceremoniously stretched out his hand towards the gate of that huge mansion and slammed it down. Boom! The gate made of steel couldn't even stop a fist of Astrius. The whole gate was smashed with a huge fist mark, and finally fell down. Who dare to break into Eddie's house? There was a scream from the door, followed by a rush of footsteps. At least 6 or 7 people heard the sound. Mark's first goal was Neil Eddy. As for why, then he can only blame him for not knowing the current affairs. Anyway, they are all suspects. Hitting 1 is hitting 2 is also hitting. The crowd that rushed out immediately surrounded the intruders, a total of 7 people. All of them were shocked when they saw the huge body of Astrius and the fist print on the door not far away. Look! Almost at the same time, these people took a step back. This level of intruder, at first glance, they can't handle them. Although these people who can be invited as guards generally have some strength, at least they are much better than ordinary people. But once faced with a strong man of Astrius level, he became like an ant on the ground. Find flowers. You go and tell the Lord. While shouting, one of them drew a pistol from his waist, pointed it at Astrius in front of them, and said to the others, shoot. Boom bang bang. Dozens of gunshots sounded in succession. These bullets were specially magicalized, and even the spirit body could be injured. If it is an ordinary hero, it may be underestimated because he thinks that thermal weapons cannot threaten the hero. I saw Astralius quickly drew out a battle axe from his back, but it seemed that he knew that a battle axe weighing more than a few hundred catties was like a light baton in Astrius's hand, waving to block the bullets around. The 6 people fired and backed away, looking extremely strategic. Unfortunately, they still underestimated their opponents. With the strength of Astralius, let alone blocking these bullets, it means not blocking him. Can these so-called magic special hot weapons hurt him? After the right-handed axe slammed again to block the flying bullet, the huge axe turned round in the air and swung it out again. The fierce double-sided axe quickly turned in a circle in the air, bringing the ground wind mixed with violent waves of magical power, and flew towards the people around it at lightning speed. What? Help! Help me! Boom! Those few people were touched by this violent wind and flew out one by one instantly. Astrius snorted, holding a battle axe in his right hand, and walking into the smashed door with his foot up. 2 rows of trembling guards were standing inside the door. After seeing the scene with their own eyes, no matter how arrogant people they were, they had to admit that they did not have the ability to resist. Chapter 1276 Kill the Quartet. Seeking automatic subscription. This article is updated by Vomiting Blood. Like to remember to bookmark this site _ So a group of people saw Astrius step in, the huge fetters rubbing on the slate floor and making a harsh sound. But no one dared to stop it. They can be said to be cold-blooded killers who have gone through the battlefield. Which one does not have dozens or hundreds of lives? Even if they have long felt that they have regarded life and death as nothing, it is just a life, and when they die, they die. But now, it can be said that everyone's heart is filled with a cloud called fear. This kind of fear is so substantive, it is pressed in the heart so that they can't even breathe. Maybe they are not afraid of death, but with this huge gap in strength, it is impossible to walk past the hill, like an ant encountering a bull. How can you not be afraid? This fear is called despair. 167. Astralius swept around, as if he hadn't seen the group of people in front of him at all. He lifted his foot and walked in. The sound of the black iron ball rubbing against the ground, as if ringing in their ears, made people tremble, flinch, and despair. Boom! Someone tremblingly fired a shot. Astrius glanced in that direction, and his right foot suddenly lifted and stomped down. Boom! A huge dull sound, accompanied by flying dust and a fierce magic wave from the inside out. The bullet was stopped by the shock before it flew to Astrius, and then, crack. The solid ground seemed so vulnerable at the feet of Astrius, like a huge boulder thrown into the frozen lake. The huge cracks spread out quickly with Astrius as the center, like a crazy blooming ground. Lian, glowing red magic burst out from the ground. What? Flee! Such a thunderous attack made the people surrounding it even too late to react, and they were already taken off. The huge shock continued for half a minute before the red light slowly calmed down, leaving only the dust in the air everywhere. Plus, I don't know which master came to visit my Eddie's house and made such a big scene. A deep voice rang out in the air, and then a burst of frenzy rose out of thin air. In an instant, the entire front yard revealed its original appearance, and there was no trace of dust in the air. It's just that this place is not what it was like at all. The ground is mottled, the walls are ruined, and countless guards are dying under the mud. Astrius raised his head and looked at the man falling from the sky. It was a middle-aged man, although the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes were getting deeper. His eyes were bright, and his blue eyes were full of coldness. Old is old, but it is vaguely visible that it was chic. It is Derek Eddy, the contemporary owner of the Eddy family. The Eddy family has been passed down to his generation, and it is already the 6th generation. Whether it is magic engraving or family territorial power, it has completely established a foothold. As a well-deserved genius of the generation, even though he could not be compared with the likes of Kenneth, he could be regarded as a dragon and phoenix among people. Therefore, since he obtained the engraving of the family magic, no one has dared to open the door so blatantly. What the hell is it? He thought he would know somehow after seeing someone, but after seeing Astrius, Derek Eddy was at a loss. This person ... or a monster. He doesn't even know it. Moreover, as the patriarch of the Eddy family, the master of the Magic Association in the sacrificial position, he didn't even know when a monster with a bull's head and such a powerful figure appeared. Derek Eddy's first reaction was that this was a finished product used by certain families for human experiments. But who is it? Regarding today's unexpected visit, he didn't even get a single message before. Astrius also stared at the person in front of him, and the dozen or so people who appeared again behind him, who seemed to be family children. But he didn't think as much as Derek Eddy thought. For him, the Master's command is absolute. Since he has given all his loyalty to Mark Sai, he should take Mark Sai's command as his primary goal. And Marks McClown's command is a trouble. Make him upside down. At this time, Mark Sai, who was hiding in the dark, still saw two familiar figures behind Derek Eddy. Isn't it the two brothers, Neil Eddy and Amos Eddy? With a slight smile, Marks McClown continued to watch the good show, and did not worry that anyone would find him. But a magician of sacrificial position, even if he inherited the family engraving, he couldn't compare with Marks McClown. At least in terms of mental power, Mark Sai is enough to crush everyone in the Eddy family. Who came from? As his thoughts flew, Derek Eddy didn't hear the monster in front of him. Just when he thought that the monster had no language function at all, Astrius responded with action. Seeing that Derek Eddy's voice was not finished, the bull-headed monster slammed the ground fiercely, held the battle axe in both hands, and slashed. The violent wave of magic power set off a hurricane in the air, and the compressed blade was hidden in it, sweeping towards Derek Eddy. Astrius' actions are too fast. And a 0.8 Rick Eddy never thought about how anyone would attack without even listening to others' words. There was no way to speak of it, so he was subconsciously at a loss. Seeing that the gust of wind was about to fly in front of him, Derek Eddy could only draw a protective magic circle in the air, and the red gem in his hand slammed into the circle, and a red light spread instantly, blocked all family members including Derek Eddy. The hurricane hit it in the next second.